Good evening. I call the special meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, May 16th to order. Good evening, Council, and those in the audience. We have one item under consent. Does anyone have any questions on that? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to approve consent.
Move consent.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the main topic of discussion, workshop on solid waste management. Who's going to take the lead? Brian?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. We're excited to be presenting to you this workshop tonight regarding solid waste management. I'm joined by, from Public Works, John Joyner and Bill Schmidt, and then from Electric Services, Donald Com and Curtis Spence. And we're each going to take different components of this presentation that relate to the areas of expertise that we have. You may recall that we had two reports last year that this workshop is now going to focus on. Both of those studies and reports had follow-up components related to them when they were initially presented. So there was a report to the City Council regarding the concept of organized garbage collection. And that was delivered in September of last year. And the council asked for us to consult with the existing solid waste haulers and discuss the outcomes and the goals that were outlined in the report, and then provide that feedback back to the council. So we've gone through that process, and the materials that you've been provided with tonight include summaries of that feedback, and we'll go over that. And then the second study is the waste to energy option study, and that report was presented in December last year, and it also included some follow-up assignments. The council provided us direction to explore two additional concepts beyond those that were evaluated by the consultants in the report. One of those was a concept whereby we would move combustion turbine number 2 and through some additional equipment, perhaps be able to save some of the capital costs associated with building a new waste to energy boiler system compared to some of the options in the report. We hired a consultant who explored the feasibility of that, and we have some results from that study. The second was for us to discuss further with Lincoln Way Energy regarding a potential partnership whereby we would partner using the city's expertise and municipal solid waste, and also the resource recovery facility. And then Lincoln Way Energy would be a purchaser of steam from a waste to energy facility that we would partner on. So we've got some follow-up information regarding those as well. So I'm going to turn it over to John and Bill to review the hauler feedback from our conversations with the haulers in the community.
Thanks. As council had directed in September, we had conversations with all 7 licensed haulers that do residential hauling in Ames. We invited them to resource recovery, and we spent about an hour visiting with each one and had a very good conversation and good input from the haulers. So these next 3 slides will summarize that input that we received. I'll touch on each topic, and then Bill can fill in some details. So the first item, go over 5 of the 7 are currently or willing to provide recycling collection. So that'd be the curbside collection. And concern with the organic recycling and collection of the organic recycling at the curb is whether the customers are interested or not, the amount of customer interest, and then also the difficulty of a disposal site. So with our program that we currently have at Resource Recovery, we have the drop-off site. And then, as you know, we're working with WPC to try to do an anaerobic digestion, but we haven't completed that process with them yet. So that'd be another concern that the haulers had.
Currently, within the state of Iowa, there is no commercial composting facility that is handling food waste. There's only 2 facilities doing food waste, and that's Cedar Rapids landfill and Iowa City landfill, and they're only handling food waste from within their counties in their comprehensive planning area. There's no one else in the state doing food waste composting.
Bill, do you know in Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, is that limited to residential, or do they also work with schools and restaurants, the larger?
I know they do residential. I think they also allow business and commercial to dispose of food waste there also.
Okay.
I think the university does dispose of some food waste there, but they do not have a program, a set program for commercial and industrial.
Okay.
It's
Where does-
primarily focused on residential.
Where does Green RU haul their stuff?
Green RU is currently hauling theirs up into Minnesota. They're picking up kind of along Interstate 35 North and hauling it in Minnesota and using a composting facility in Minnesota.
And then all 7 of the haulers do provide some form of yard waste collection. And that varies in the type of pickup and also the duration that they provide that pickup throughout the year. Then one issue that we wanted to learn about is if the haulers provide pay-as-you-throw rates. So 2 of the 7 do, and that would be the way they achieve the pay-as-you-throw is by providing different size of carts. One of the concerns we heard with that is that having multiple sizes of carts creates both difficulty for maintaining that inventory as well as for the type of collection that they do at the curb. And then the smaller the curbside unit, the more difficult the environmental aspects are, such as wind, storms, animals being able to get in and tip those over. So they did have those concerns with the smaller size carts.
Do any of them have capability to measure weight?
At this time, none of them do have weight as an option on their collection equipment. That is something that's available on some, but none have their equipment set up with that. They did talk, as John talked about, the standardized carts. For the simple fact, so many of them are going to automated collection system just due to the tight labor market and the safety of the employees of lifting garbage cans around, moving around from workman's comp standpoint.
Sure.
And that standardized cart really makes it much more efficient for them to do the collection type of system.
Thanks.
So the next issue that we discussed was reflecting the concern from council and from neighbors about multiple trips throughout the week of multiple trucks going through the neighborhood for refuse as well as for recycling, and having multiple trips because of that. The haulers did support eliminating the requirement that we currently have to provide twice per week municipal solid waste refuse pickup and going to once a week collection. And some haulers have already taken the steps to move away from that. So if we were to do that, that would reduce the number of trips, obviously, to just 1 trip per hauler per neighborhood at the most. Then we were curious how they establish the routes. 3 of the 7 haulers do use routing software, so they maximize their routes through the assistance of that software. Another one's considering doing that.
The other ones say that's the way they operate their business with the cost of fuel, the cost of equipment, and cost of labor. They need to be as efficient as possible. They pick up a combination of both residential and commercial. So they may start on the west side of town and work their way east, picking up residential and commercial together to maximize or minimize the amount of miles they have to drive and be more efficient.
Then we were curious what type of fuel they use and if they have any type of more sustainable type fuel that are utilized in their fleet. So 5 of the 7 use biodiesel. 1 uses compressed natural gas. We talked about the technology that's available as far as going to electric trucks, and they all felt that technology, as far as a pure electric unit, was not quite there yet to meet the needs for residential pickup. Then we received several suggestions from the haulers. When we were talking with them about zones, that led to the suggestion that 1 collection day be assigned per zone or per neighborhood, so that the city would divide up the community in some manner And then whether it's a zone or a neighborhood, and no matter the hauler, that would be that zone or neighborhood's collection day. Then in discussing the recyclables with them, one of the impediments for some of the smaller haulers was that small amount of recyclables that they pick up. And one thing they mentioned that would help them with that curbside aspect is if there was a transfer station, rather than taking a partial load down to Metro Waste or Shupan or wherever in the metro, or letting that partial truck just have to sit before it goes out to do the next collection. If they had a transfer station, that would help enable them to do the curbside recycling.
Could you talk more about that, John? What would that look like?
That'd be something that we would have to establish and find the space to do that. City staff would operate that. Any details on what that might look like?
Yeah, potentially we would just let the haulers dump there. We'd have a tipping fee. And then we would aggregate it into a semi potentially and use just one semi to haul it down Des Moines rather than having the individual haulers, because one of these side loaded garbage trucks costs about $400,000 a piece. So to tie that up for a 3-hour trip to Des Moines and back for 3 or 4 tons of recyclables is a big investment on their part, and takes a lot of time, effort, fuel, and wear and tear on the vehicle. So to be more efficient and be more mindful of greenhouse gases and carbon emissions, that would be something potentially could be done in-house within the city. We could collect all those there, and then maybe we have the haul down 2 or 3 times a week by semi.
Yeah, thanks. Very helpful.
We also discussed the construction and demolition waste that's currently being hauled by every hauler to Boone, and briefly discussed the possibility of creating some type of a C&D recycling station. That was just an idea that we threw out during our discussions. Another suggestion to limit the amount of traffic is capping the number of licenses. So we have 7 right now, so putting a cap on that. And that can be managed as you go forward in a couple of different ways. As a hauler may retire or sell the business, then that license would become available to the entity purchasing that business. Or if they're retiring and going out of business, then that could open up that license for another hauler to come into the community. Another suggestion was that we start with those 7 currently licensed haulers, and then as they retire, go out of business or what have you, that they not be backfilled. So if a hauler were to go out of business, then that license, the ability to get that license would just go away. Another suggestion that we received from quite a few, if not all, was the possibility of requiring landlords to have the refuse collection contract with the haulers, rather than a lot of landlords pass that on to the tenant. So that does cause some issues throughout the year, contracting with the more transient nature of that, and be more stable going with the landlords. However, in staff discussions, which include legal, we don't feel that's probably something that we could legally add to our enforcement code.
John, could you go back to the prior one? It'd be helpful to know, have we seen stability in the number of trash haulers over the last 10 years? Have the 7 changed?
The 7 have changed makeup, different companies, but we're usually around that 6 to 7 companies is usually what we have doing residential pickup within the city.
So, I mean, this is really heading towards the discussion of limiting the number of haulers. And so just through attrition over time, we could achieve that goal, rather than sort of on the front end, creating some kind of limitation that could just happen through attrition. But I don't really understand that if the trash haulers have been consistent, then that's really not going to help us. But if there's been some natural attrition and been some changes in the market, then that does become more viable for us. So you're suggesting that there has been some change of players over the last 10 years?
There's been different change in ownerships of some of the companies, but the number of companies has been fairly constant.
Okay, thanks.
So and then discussing the alternate model with them of having citywide or having zones and then having to bid to provide service within those zones. 2 of the 7 haulers had support at some level of going to that type of system. Really, one of those 2 was more enthusiastic than the other in their support of that type of a system. 2 of the 7 do not support going to a bid. But however, if that was what City Council had directed, they want to continue to provide service to the community, so they would participate in that and submit a bid or a proposal. And 3 of the 7 strongly opposed it, and they weren't sure if that would be an issue that might drive them out of providing service in our community. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I would say on the 2 of 7 that did not support, would participate in the business. The impression was that they felt if that was the only way that they could stay in the Ames market, they would do it, but they definitely did not want to do it. It was not their prerogative. They just felt that they needed that level of business to keep their company afloat.
Can you give us some idea of the expanse of the markets that the 7 haulers are contracting with? Because I have no clue whether they're large, regional, I don't know.
We've got one national company in town. We've got one regional company that also does business in Minneapolis, Des Moines, and St. Louis. And then we've got a number of smaller regional companies here in Central Iowa. And then we've got some that just offer service primarily here in Story County. So we've got a range of different businesses and haulers that offer services here in the community. I think we did some looking, and I think it was roughly 15 or 16,000 residential homes is what we determined would be covered under residential services.
And to replay what we discussed in our prior meeting, there are a number of peer cities in central Iowa that have these fixed zones. So this is not a novel idea. It's just would be a significant change for those who are currently at play. Can you just remind us some of the cities that have this kind of organized zones already? Brian, do you remember that?
Well, most of the cities that would be representative, we'd be thinking about the communities that participate in Metro Waste Authority.
Yeah.
So Metro Waste Authority handles a bid process for each of the cities that are covered by their services, but each of those cities might have a different set of services that they want provided. Metro Waste Authority, when they put out their RFP, they're putting out multiple pages, one for each sort of flavor of community, and asking for responses from haulers to be able to serve that community. So it's basically, when we're talking about this zone concept, that's basically like taking how it works in the Des Moines metro area and shrinking it down to a city level.
Yeah.
So instead of having one hauler for the whole community, which is something that's common across Iowa, there's probably at least half the communities in Iowa have just a single hauler, or the city provides it itself. Instead of going with just one and the risks that go along with that, we'd be looking at dividing the city into zones and then having multiple haulers participate, one over here, one over there, and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
That's
helpful.
the concept. Yep.
So the most consistent concern that was brought up amongst the haulers was with a zoned and organized collection system is the customer choice going away. So they all felt that they provide exceptional customer service, and they like to use that connection with their customers to build their customer base, to build their business. They've made connections with people over the years. They feel like people have brand loyalty to particular haulers, and going with that type of system would take that away. They're also concerned about the lack of competition, may lead to a lesser level of customer service across the community. And then, of course, with move in and move out, there'd be concerns with one hauler being overwhelmed potentially by that volume that we deal with during the move in, move out times associated with the university. Also, just the lead time, if we were to go with a citywide type model, for someone to ramp up to get the trucks, the carts, everything, and the labor needed to operate a system like that. So those were the concerns that we pretty much heard across the board.
Yeah, just to echo some of John's comments there, they really, to a company talked about their customer service and kind of going from a customer-based service to an impersonal service, rather than building that relationship with the customer where they know the customer's name and picking the cart up to, okay, we've got this address, we pick up the cart at 7:00. If it's not there at 7:00, we go on, rather than going up and getting that cart. They didn't know if there would be anything to push them to do anything more than that. They were kind of concerned about that. Talked about some of the main goals of what we're trying to accomplish and making sure we're looking at the data to accomplish those goals. Are we looking just simply greenhouse gas? Are we looking at miles driven? Are we looking at reducing the amount of waste? But what the options are and how we can best come to the best solution that will work for the community and the citizens. They talked a number of times about getting input from the citizens and the customers, what they want, what they need, where they see that there's gaps that could be filled or worked on. And one of the things we talked about is there are some questions in the customer satisfaction survey that's going out, and they said maybe even a potential outreach so customers will get information from them. They talked a little bit about the collection criteria and recycling. That's something we as a city could look at. If we want to do curbside recycling, that's something that we could potentially put into code and require it as part of getting their license, to offer a specific set of services in a cart size or something along those lines. We can certainly take a look at that. And as John talked about with the move in, move out, with only having 2 haulers that were interested in supporting the contract bidding system, a number of the haulers talked about the fact of how they handled a tremendous increase in volume of material during that time period. We see tonnage literally double within that time period for about a 4-week period. And how do they have enough equipment with just 2 companies versus spreading it across 7 different companies? And then, when there's operational challenges, the waste energy system, power plant right now has got some challenges with the RDF bin and with Unit 8. So 50% of the garbage is currently going to the Boone County landfill. How does 1 or 2 companies manage that versus a number of companies spreading it across all the companies? So those are some of the other questions they had.
So the idea of getting community input came up from the haulers. We're also on top of that with the satisfaction survey. But to what extent should we also be thinking about community more broadly defined as those people who are part of the 2080 agreement that are not getting our community survey and who maybe aren't even very aware of the discussions that are going on here in Ames that could impact them if the balance of haulers changes?
That's a good question. I mean, if you'd like to direct us to that, we could certainly take a look at that. We do offer glass recycling in all of our partner communities also. That's something we can definitely take a look at as we look at recycling, doing a pilot program here as we talk about further in the program. Doing that, potentially that's something we could move out into the member communities also and try and get additional participation there.
We'll get to it a little bit later in the presentation as well, but one of the items that we think is worth working on is having some more conversations specifically with the partnering communities in the 2080 agreement for the resource recovery system to talk more about what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve, and what our interests and goals are, and whether there are different ways we could explore to achieve that.
And any changes to the hauling model or regulations would be mainly specific to the community of Ames, but you're right that that could certainly have ripple effects into the partner communities.
Any other questions? Yeah, I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around you have all these different haulers and they have their workforce and their trucks, and just trying to envision if you went to zones and one hauler had one zone, but they didn't have other zones, was there any conversation, or did you think about just the impact that would have on an individual hauler? Because if they're doing X number of pickups every day and they have 5 days worth of work, in the city, all of a sudden if they're just having work for one day in one zone, how would that affect their business model? They'd have to find work someplace else for the other 4 days. So, I mean,
I think the 1 day per each zone is a different concept than the zone and bid, right? That's why the
Right.
haulers
No,
are suggesting it.
I agree. I was thinking more in terms of I'm jumping ahead, but if you were to bid, like 10 zones or 12 zones, and only one hauler would have that one zone. I was just trying to think through. Yeah, the sign collection, one collection day per neighborhood, completely different. I agree. I'm just trying to, and you probably see, Bill, people, coming in, and they're also probably picking up commercial, waste as well too. And the more I think about it, like everything we do in the city, it's complex. There's lots of moving pieces, and I just, the more I reflect on this, it just, we don't want to simplify this thinking it's simple, because it's probably not simple, and it could have some profound implications in terms of the execution, going forward. So
You raise a point that came up in our last meeting, that we want to do something that serves the community broadly well, but we also want to be mindful that these are people who made investments in equipment.
Right.
They made that with the anticipation that there would be certain work, and we're going to change the rules of the game on the midstream. And so how do we navigate that? So like that came up last meeting.
yeah, Brian, did council have a set of descending priorities that they were trying to accomplish that would help in terms of moving the conversation forward, or is that something that was just more general discussion? Because I think that might be helpful to kind of get an idea, what are the priorities they're trying to accomplish? Is it reducing wear and tear on streets? Is it reducing carbon footprint? Is it, because I don't know that we've had many, I haven't seen any emails, people complaining they have terrible garbage service. So it's not a service situation. It's more or less, it was having 5, 6, 8 trucks each day, 5 days a week, going through the neighborhoods. So I was just trying to think, did council articulate what the goals were that we're trying, or the priorities?
So we talked about in the previous report, there were about 10 or 12 different
Objectives?
different areas that might be influenced, right, by changing the model of how garbage works. So wear and tear on streets, carbon footprint, pricing, variety of services offered, truck traffic, all those types of things. Customer choice. Right? And I recall at the end of that discussion, the council had more of an informal discussion about some of the things that were important individually, but the council as a group hasn't gone through and prioritized all of those to say this is what you would like to achieve most of all.
And many of them tie back to sustainability, right? Because we recognize that this is not something that the haulers are going to be looking forward to doing, and it's going to be hard for the citizens to take too, I think, right? So the reason we're going on beyond, with those things in mind, is that there are a number of reasons that if we organize our collection, it's better for sustainability. And I don't mean just literal greenhouse gas emissions, although that's a big piece of it. But you have sustainability in terms of like the wear and the tear on the streets. And that's an economic sustainability issue when you think about it, because it costs us money to repair streets and to build new ones. And so there are many, but overarching that umbrella, it's all sustainability, right? How can we keep going as a community in the modern day with greenhouse things to think about and climate change issues? And how can we exist in a way that we can perpetuate into the future, right?
Okay, any other questions on this particular segment of the presentation?
So if there's
Anything else?
nothing further on the organized collection specific component, we're going to shift gears here and talk about the specific follow-up from the waste to energy options study.
I guess this is where I take over. Just a brief background. So where this is coming from, we had a consultant come in, and as council knows, presently right now, we burn refuse-derived fuel. And to explain that, we take the county's municipal solid waste, it's processed at resource recovery. That creates RDF, or refuse-derived fuel. We bring that into the power plant and commingle it with natural gas and burn that in either Unit 7 or Unit 8, the two large units at the end of Main Street. From that report, there were several different options that were looked at, and they ranged anywhere from the kind of status as is. And then we also looked at other concepts where, again, to sustainability and to the climate action plan, we wanted to try to move away where we could, away from using natural gas as a coal-fired fuel, and see if there are other technologies out there that would allow us to burn basically the refuse-derived fuel, or there are also concepts out there where you can just burn the straight municipal solid waste. And those were looked at, and we presented those to council the end of December. The price tag ranged anywhere from 120 million to 200 and something million. There were a couple of concepts that came back. One is the heat recovery steam generator, or HRSG concept. I'm going to hand it over to Curtis, because Curtis and his team initially came up with this idea because we have some existing resources that exist within electric, that maybe there would be some ways to capitalize on some of our existing resources and still accomplish everything we wanted to do, but fall underneath that price tag. So Curtis.
Yeah, so one of looking at all those options, given the amount of waste that we have in the county and burning that, we looked at around generating around 5 megawatts roughly. And so we thought, given with our combustion turbines and the technology with a heat recovery system generator that is out there, maybe we can come up with a concept that we could use the waste heat off of the stack from GT2 and add that to this new waste to energy boiler, producing additional steam that we could then have additional generation for a reasonable amount of capital. So we hired Sergeant Lundy to perform that study, and they have not finalized the report yet, but they have provided us a draft and a good understanding of some of their findings. And one thing is that the theory that this can happen has been proven. And actually, there was a technical paper written, I think back in 1999 in the Netherlands, that was titled integrating waste to energy, or a waste boiler and combustion turbine. And that talks about the theory and being able to use that to have the economics help. But in looking, Sergeant Lundy continued to look at maybe what facilities are built, not only within the nation possibly, but also around the world, And with that search, they found one plant that was built in Spain that continues to function today. It's much larger than what we would be looking at for our size. And it also requires that both the combustion turbine and the waste portion is in operation at the same time, which is something that we were trying not to do. And so given that there's only one plant in operation today and that the sizing is much different than what we would be doing, and it's not quite achieving all the things that we were looking at, which is including being able to turn off the combustion turbine and only run the waste portion when needed. It's very difficult to estimate the costs. And there was some conversations with current OEM manufacturers of waste energy boilers, manufacturers of different equipment around the combustion turbines, and there was a lot of hesitancy because of the assumed price of trying to build something that was first of its kind at this size, and even just with the uniqueness of being able to turn on and off the combustion turbine. And so Sergeant Lundy was not able to put together a good concept for costs, but they were very strong in their opinion of saying it was going to be very expensive. One thing that they did get was an alternate proposal where it was an idea where more of a traditional heat recovery steam generator, where basically the combustion turbine sends its flue gas into a HRSG, which then you produce steam, and then separately the waste energy boiler would produce steam, and then those would be those would come together and then produce megawatts on the turbine. But to do that, you would have to purchase a much larger turbine. So they said that it would cost around $80 million extra to achieve a 17 megawatt increase, which with those numbers, the costs far outweigh the benefits.
I have to admit, I'm very sorry to hear that, because I was thinking this could be a great opportunity for Ames to be innovative again, like we were with the resource recovery plant initially. But that sounds like a really huge price to pay for that amount of energy and uncertainty.
Other opportunities.
So, Gloria, that's an excellent segue because there still is an opportunity to be innovative, and I'm going to talk about that next. So, another one, or some of the concepts that came out of that original study had basically the city of Ames building a new boiler, building a new turbine, building a new generator, and things like that, or making some kind of combination. Some of the other options, though, were to maybe look off-site. There were some benefits about, well, maybe can we get it out of downtown and could we do something new? And they were listed like options 3A, I think, and 3B back in the study. And one of the partners that we talked to was Lincoln Way Energy. And in fact, I think there are 4 of Lincoln Way Energy's board members and senior officers are in the audience tonight too. If you have questions on this in more detail. But with Lincoln Way Energy, the concept then would be, it started off where they, in their unique processes, have a desire for steam that is not produced with natural gas. And burning RDF produces steam, not using natural gas. So initially, we were talking to them about maybe a partnership where we could provide them some level of steam, and then they could take that onto their property, then use it. So we would be more of a RDF provider and a boiler provider and not worry about the electric side. As the talk continued, I think Curtis mentioned that with the design that we're looking at, if we purely burn RDF, rather than generating about 45 megawatts, which is what we do in our larger unit combined with natural gas, we would produce roughly about 5 megawatts. And that's kind of a start for what Lincoln Way is looking for. So this branched out into looking for other partners. And I'll talk about Ames' role in this in a second. But some of those other partners, we first suggested that they talk to their local electric provider and see if they would be interested in working on that. Since then, they've now started talking with an organization that's called Berkshire Hathaway Energy, and they've had some discussions with them, and Lincoln Way Energy shared that with us too, where the concept could even be larger than just Ames, and that kind of changes the relationship in here to where we would just be one cog in a bigger organization. The intent here, and this is again very preliminary, and there's still a lot of discussions going on, but the intent or the idea would be that, again, the county would continue to provide either municipal solid waste or refuse-derived fuel to a site probably at or near Lincoln Way Energy. It then would be Berkshire Hathaway Energy that then would build the plant to take that, make steam, but they would also, the concept is they would also make electricity, to which then that energy could come back to Ames and help power our needs to a certain extent. Some of the challenges that opens up is, interestingly enough, Story County does not have enough garbage. Whereas on one side, we're trying to deal with it. We're now kind of looking at the flip side to where it would be the responsibility probably of Berkshire Hathaway or other places looking for additional fuel sources. We're not seeing that as Ames' responsibility or Story County's responsibility. So that concept is out there where it could realistically look like a regional waste to energy facility, and you start gaining some of those economies of scale that you've heard a lot from us, that Ames just isn't big enough to get to that comfortable size that many of the vendors of this type are looking for. Let's see if I missed anything. I haven't even looked at the slide to see if I missed anything. So I think I covered it all there. Again, it's very preliminary, and there are still many details to work out. Numbers have to be looked at in terms of costs, expectations, the amount of RDF and municipal solid waste needed. But the concept itself is forward thinking, but it's going to take several different entities beyond Ames, Electric Services, Resource Recovery to put something like that together.
Now, we've been sort of toggling back and forth on some of these topics, but let me pull back in. I think there's a lot of interest on council at integrating recycling into this. So, and I know there are several here that I'm particularly interested as well on the composting side of it as well. So how do those goals factor into the waste to energy? And then I don't want to lose sight of this, the comment earlier that 50% of our garbage now is going to Boone. I think that's a surprise to many people that number is that high right now. And could you just speak quickly, is that a recent trend? Is that something that we could at some point compress again?
You want to talk about the second one first, and then I'll cover the.
Sure. When the power plant is on Unit 8, we can handle all the waste through the resource recovery facility, and it can be consumed and burned at the power plant. They've had some challenges with the storage bin that they have, and Unit 8 went offline last Thursday. They're now on Unit 7 as of Friday. With that, Unit 7 can only burn about 60% of what Unit 8 can. So when we're on Unit 7, they can't burn all the waste that we can process. So normally we get about 220 tons to 230 tons on a Monday. This Monday we got 306 tons. Graduation, everyone moving out of town. So we're getting more material in than what they can burn. So when that happens, we have to do some sort of diversion. Rather than send 100% of the garbage over to Boone at one time, we have to send 50%. So we're for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week, 50% of all the tonnage from Story County is going to the Boone County landfill. So we can have room to process and continue to process what material does come.
Well, when 8's running, normally it wouldn't be that high of a figure, right?
When 8's running, we wouldn't divert anything.
Yeah.
So
I want to clarify.
We do divert, I think, was it 15%? I thought there's some things that we don't burn that we do divert. I thought it was 15%. I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, there's material that's not beneficial to us. For instance, the sandpaper cutouts from 3M, we do not process that. Some of the Danfoss industrial waste, we do not process that. Burke, Barilla, some of their industrial material, we're not able to process. That goes directly to Boone County landfill. I normally don't consider that because that's not material that we would normally take.
Yeah,
And-
so it drops out. We normally take over,
Right.
the amount over there. This is the amount that we divert because we couldn't process.
Right.
But
One
that
more-
number is not the average. or
that's
the
not the routine number.
routine number. It was pointed that was a misstatement in the sense, I think, of this whole year.
And one more question on Boone. Do we have a contract with them that has an expiration date at some point?
We have an agreement with them through 2025 for them to take our rejects and our commercial, our C&D, our construction demolition debris.
So that's tomorrow.
It's relatively soon, yes.
We have to think in terms of, so is there any kind of, are we starting to negotiate with them for an extension on that?
We did have a joint meeting with the Boone County Board of Supervisors and Story County Board of Supervisors. Came with a resource recovery last month, and we had a joint meeting to kind of do a tour and talk about kind of what the goals and objectives are. And I think Brian's going to cover this a little bit later in the presentation. We're looking at putting together a solid waste management plan for Story County. So we can kind of put what our goals and objectives are there for diversion, recycling, for construction, demolition, and then how that fits with Boone County or with any other partners that we may need to work with in the future.
That's a really important variable for us to keep in mind. If we don't have that as a diversion option, this conversation gets much more difficult. So thanks for that.
Before Don and Curtis move on, can I just ask something quick, Bill? I think I saw in the report that raising the cost of disposing of the construction and demolition debris has not resulted in any sort of reduction in the amount that's being tipped.
That is what Boone County's informed us. So they're see about the same amount. They're averaging a little over 17,000 tons a year. I mean, it may go from 16,000 to 18,000, but that's what they've been averaging is about 17,000 tons a year of construction demolition debris. They're up over $70 a ton for construction demolition debris versus I think Marshall County is $55 or $58 a ton, and Metro is even lower than that.
I was just going to add a clarifier for you, Tim, that it's 50% of the waste that's going into resource recovery. So usually all the waste goes into resource recovery, and then out the back and around there's 30 some percent. Bill will have this that goes to the landfill out of that usually. So it's of what's going into resource recovery that's been
Okay.
reduced to 50%.
Thanks.
The other thing that you'd first asked about is recycling and organics.
Yep.
From an organic standpoint, organics don't make a good fuel. It's much better to
Right.
compost or put it in a digester. And I think we're going to be talking a little bit about that here in the near future. And then on recycling, you bet. If you look at the Environmental Protection Agency's hierarchy of waste, first thing you want to try to use is not have it to begin with, then reuse, reduce, or recycle. Then you start looking at it as a waste to energy fuel, and then you look at landfilling. So recycling would be in the EPA's hierarchy a better thing to do with it. Those that have recycling benefits, we've seen aluminum cans and things like that where the value in recycling it continues to drop and things like that. But those are some of the things you'd look at, and it could reduce some of the fuel that would be coming into any power plant.
Okay. Thanks.
The point about the boiler or 8 being down, unit 8 being down right now, and so our capacity for even sorting, right, being reduced. I've mentioned this before, I think, and I mean, we haven't done anything with it, but it's just a thought. Like, I wish there were a way to better communicate when that happens to the public, because a little bit, could store garbage for you, and many of them probably might. Like if they only have half their bin full and they're like, oh, I heard the plant's down for 2 weeks. Why don't I hang on? Like it could be done a little bit where people might flex their own waste habits if they knew that your capacity is down. But if they don't know, there's no way they can do that, of course. So I don't know if there'd be a good way to do that without shooting ourselves in the foot, in terms of like, it's not great to broadcast like, hey, our thing's broken. But it would be, yeah, people might then be able to make a conscious decision about holding garbage back. So maybe like a little health meter on the website that would go up or down, like capacity meter or something like that, that could be not real time, obviously, but like someone could adjust it a little bit when a big, there's a big impediment, like a whole unit being down.
That's a good idea. We do that for peak of work and electricity, right?
Yes.
We ask people to help out by conserving during those times. So really, it doesn't have to be negative. It's a capacity issue that we're asking.
Yes, there you go. You can think of it. You could market it
Good
that
idea.
way. Yeah.
Other questions? So, Don and Curtis, not that Lincoln Way Energy isn't going to be there forever, but what happens if they decide that they want to change what they're doing, or they don't have a need for steam anymore?
Right.
What happens then? I mean, how have you factored that into your evaluation? And I can see we're seconding that essentially to somebody else, Berkshire Hathaway. That becomes their issue, but still what happens if they say, well, we can't sell steam, so we don't want your trash?
Those would be some of the challenges. I mean, the system that we have today, we basically cover garbage from birth to death. We're the city's indirectly into that pathway, and we have brought that up with Lincoln Way Energy. There would be some opportunities, and again, we're still at the high level, so we'd have to talk in specific terms to get there. But we've talked about things where, if Lincoln Way were no longer there or no longer needing steam in the future, could we push all of the steam directly into the turbine, make electricity, and all that so Ames would remain somewhat in that loop. The piece that is uncertain is, would Berkshire Hathaway want to continue to operate that power plant?
Mm-hmm.
And could there be some provisions that would say that, if they chose not to, what would happen and how would Ames be protected in those particular cases? We'd have to put that into the agreement. None of that has been decided or worked out, but it's definitely a discussion point.
And also, we buy electricity from MISO, and we have to have a certain level or capacity of generating like 130 some megawatts, right? So do we get a benefit from that, or does that go away? And Berkshire Hathaway, I mean, how does that affect our capacity for generation? Is there a benefit to that? Because as we continue to grow, we're going to have to increase our generation to stay with MISO, correct?
That is correct.
So maybe you can unpack how you're thinking about that. And 'cause I was thinking that maybe if you did our own waste to energy plant that we could generate electricity, that might be a double bonus. One is we're dealing with improving an existing situation, but also getting some more generating capacity in order, especially if we're going to see more electric vehicles, you're going to see more conversion of electricity
Yep.
demands in our community as it is, plus as we grow. So
If we do waste to energy on our own, we'll basically probably add maybe between 5 to 8 new megawatts of capacity. We get both the capacity and the energy. This concept would be considerably bigger. The number that has been floating around is upwards or up to something like 100 megawatts. And again, the details have to be worked out with Berkshire Hathaway, but they would want an off-taker of both the capacity and the energy out of that system. So Ames would be the beneficiary of the capacity and the energy, and if there are renewable energy credits that come by burning refuse-derived fuel, all three of those things would come back to Ames probably at a price. And that's, like I said, we got to work out the details to make sure that it is cost effective for us to do that.
And so can Berkshire Hathaway come in here, since they also own Mid-American, right? Can they come in a service territory that is currently either Alliant or ours and just drop a plant in to generate electricity?
So the reason why this is not Mid-American Energy, and the reason why Berkshire Hathaway wants to work with Ames, is Berkshire Hathaway cannot build a generator and sell it to Mid-American. You get that conflict in there. But Berkshire Hathaway Energy, as a company that builds generation, could put a plant in anywhere and sell us the energy, much like the wind that we purchase currently from NextEra. NextEra is the parent of an investor-owned utility in Florida. So they came up here, built the wind turbines, and we signed a contract with them. So it's done all the time that they could build the plant and then sell us the electricity.
And so would that also benefit Iowa State, knowing that they have their own climate action plan? They're trying to go ahead and really get to being, carbon neutral, essentially. Does that have a component that they would be interested in partnering with or helping with that too, or not? Or
Yes, with the both with that project and then the wind and solar projects that we have a request for proposal that we're currently studying. Iowa State has been offered pieces, if you will, of any and all of those projects, as we have partnered with them on the solar farm down south and on the wind. We've made that available to them.
thank you.
Don, you said that this discussion, Berkshire Hathaway has been interested in perhaps up to 100 megawatts of production. What is our number that we're shooting for?
So that's an interesting question, because you could be talking energy and you could be talking capacity. So from a capacity standpoint, I think it was mentioned that we have peaked at 130 megawatts. Because we jointly report with Iowa State, our combined load is something in the neighborhood of about 160. That's our combined capacity load. When you look at energy, that peak capacity only occurs 1 hour every single year. When you start looking at energy, we're looking for, or we sell approximately 600,000 megawatt hours a year. So depending upon what kind of generation resource, let's say we're looking at wind has a certain capacity factor. So we may need 150 megawatts of wind to provide a certain amount of energy. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. In a power plant like this, if it's truly operating at 100 megawatts, that is probably on the that would satisfy the majority of our needs day in and day out, because supposedly it would be up, you'd get the garbage in, it would continue to run flat. Wind turbines and solar panels, you have to look at when it's producing and when we need it.
And not to throw another wrinkle in, but just recently there's been some discussion about prohibiting power plants from using natural gas to produce electricity, correct?
So I can answer that in several different aspects. Are you talking about it from our climate action plan standpoint, or
No,
how
I'm talking about what the federal government is considering, and the Department of Energy, and the new regulations are coming down. And I'm just thinking, this is an intriguing opportunity potentially, that if that becomes a reality, how are we going to generate power? And if they're going to build a 100 megawatt plant or whatever, is there an opportunity to try and get ahead of the curve, so to speak? I know that you and I talked about this the other day, and that it's probably mired in courts for some time. But the point is, I'm just trying to anticipate. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and how can we kind of leverage it so our customers continue to get great service and reasonable rates?
It is something that we're looking at. I don't believe that our country today, Ames in particular, can walk away from fossil fuel or coal-fired generation until there are other advancements in storage, nuclear, and things like that. But we are looking at this project and we're intrigued by it. Going back to, I think, what Gloria said, is being on that forefront and looking ahead to see what the future might hold.
So this has been an interesting conversation to watch because you're all going through a similar journey as all five of us, as we've been trying to figure out where exactly we stand and what we need to do to move forward, right? So these options that are outlined here are a long ways off from being something that we could potentially do. So what we're trying to do is figure out, how do we reconcile all of the different influences that surround how we deal with solid waste? And that's why this workshop became larger than simply a follow-up to the organized collection report. Because as we sat there and thought about the next steps with regard to organized collection, we also thought about how do we reconcile that with the next steps that we have to take with waste to energy? How do we reconcile that with the city's climate action plan? And how do we reconcile that with, as Tim brought up, the comprehensive plan expiring in a couple of years? And what steps do we need to take? What are the things that we should be prioritizing? What kinds of wastes do we want to put where to achieve all of the different goals that are outlined in all of these different studies and reports and plans? So as we as city staff talked through that, we came up with a preliminary hierarchy of goals that we think are, as we synthesize all of those plans, we think this hierarchy of goals starts to emerge. And you'll find that it follows very similarly the EPA waste hierarchy, but includes some of the local circumstances that we experience in order to meet our specific situation. So one goal that we think emerges out of how we have operated over several decades and out of the plans that the council has adopted and so forth is that we desire as a community to landfill as little as possible. Putting more things in the landfill is not something that aligns with all of those plans and goals that the council has reviewed and adopted. The second is that we don't want to combust any more natural gas and RDF in the power plant than we need to. We want to combust as little of that as possible. And ideally, if we have to combust it, we want to do it at a time when it's most economical to do so. So the times that we have to do it, we don't want to be burning lots of natural gas at times when we could be buying energy on the market for very, very little money, or at times when the contract price of natural gas is very, very expensive. And the third goal that starts to emerge from all of this is that we want to reduce the amount of municipal solid waste that's going in the front door of the resource recovery plant, because we know that that the volume of waste that's coming in at times when we have outages in the boiler, or at times when when we could be burning, or when we could be purchasing energy more cheaply, it would be really great if we had that waste going to a more appropriate location. And so that means things like separating out the types of waste that can be separated out. And we talked through what are some of the things that we could do to explore that would achieve this hierarchy of these goals. So you'll find these in, yes.
Before we go on.
Yep.
And would it make sense to add a financial component to the hierarchy of goals, because we have to work within certain financial constraints? I mean, that's part of why I was really interested in looking at resource recovery plan, was because of the level of investment we were making in it. It seems like that could also be a goal in there. There has to be some kind of cost benefit analysis in this.
Yeah, I think as you evaluate how you achieve landfill as little as possible, right? So the cost to separate out everything and avoid landfilling everything is very, very high. And we would have to explore what are the different ways that how are we going to get the most bang for our buck in achieving these, right?
Right.
What are the different strategies that we want to explore that might work towards achieving these goals? And that includes looking at the financial feasibility of them.
Yeah, you're looking at financial feasibility.
Yep.
Are you looking at
Yeah.
the most cost effective?
We maybe that's just sort of is presumed on that.
No, it's always good to
list.
say.
Taxpayers are wanting us to make sure we're thinking about feasibility.
So we, as staff, brainstormed a variety of strategies that we think are worth exploring. I want to caution that we don't know yet whether any or all of these are going to solve the challenges that we've laid out for you. But we think all of these are worth at least looking into and coming up with some sort of an overarching strategic plan for what we want to achieve with regard to garbage. So one potential strategy is arranging for a different way of collecting and disposing of recyclable materials than we've historically done. So historically, we have told the community to generally to put all of their waste into their garbage, and we will separate it out at resource recovery. Obviously, with the volume of tonnage that's coming into resource recovery, we're approaching the upper limit of what we can handle. And so perhaps there are ways that we can separate out through curbside recycling, through alternative disposal sites. We have already implemented glass recycling at different locations throughout Story County. There are opportunities for us to explore how can we expand that further? How can we add additional materials to that type of separation to get it out of the waste stream to begin with, so that it doesn't even have to hit the front door of resource recovery. So that's one strategy that we think speaks to those different goals.
With the haulers as partners, probably.
Right, using the haulers to accomplish that is one of the components that we would want to evaluate. Another is how we dispose of and collect organic debris. We have our food waste diversion program. That program is very small at the moment. I think we're still considering that a pilot. We're talking about perhaps 20 tons per year. Is that about right?
We're up to, a little over.
But we know that there's a substantial amount of organic debris that gets into the collection system, and the haulers are bringing it to resource recovery. And that is a component of municipal solid waste that is not really valuable at resource recovery, and it's not really valuable at the power plant. So getting it to a more appropriate location is worth exploring from our perspective. We've had a lot of conversations with Boone County officials about the challenges that they experience when our system is unable to process all of the garbage that we have. One of the particular pain points that we've heard from Boone County is with regard to construction and demolition debris, because that material is produced in Story County in significant quantities because of the level of construction that we have going on here. And it's material that doesn't compact. It's not really affected by market factors like raising the tipping fees. So we think it's worthwhile having a conversation with Boone County Landfill and the haulers and potential other partners to figure out, is there a better place for that? Because right now it seems to be having a major impact on Boone County Landfill. And I think there are concerns from their end about the life expectancy of the landfill if that were to continue.
That seems, it's a little bit odd, because we've been saying how slow our construction has been over recent years. And yet Boone County's already experiencing challenges. If we have more construction, conceivably it's only going to get worse.
So I'll tell you, just on a personal note, every day when I drive home, there are a lot of semi trucks taking the old Ames High School to Boone County piece by piece for months. So we do produce a pretty substantial quantity of construction and demolition material, and it's got a lot of challenges.
Water plant, the water plant's next. Yeah. Whole water plant.
One of the things we talked about is we have done pilot programs for.
I want to clarify,
yeah.
water plant, we are recycling 90% of that. It's not going to Boone County landfill.
The bricks,
Very nice.
Really? That's
90%.
Well, just point of clarification too is that concrete and brick is considered clean material and can be used for filling ravines and the like too. And so contractors are not anxious about paying $70 a ton for all that. So I think they do divert a lot of that and try and find places where they can legally dispose of it. But there still are things that are they consider dirty material that you cannot, ceiling tile, for example.
Yep, we're talking about all of that.
Yep.
Right. So what else can we do with that as an alternative to boom? So we've implemented a variety of pilot programs in the resource recovery system, and this includes food waste diversion. This includes I think the glass recycling initially started as a pilot program. I think I'd consider it to be a little broader than a pilot at this point. But one of the things that we talked about is we may not be able to get by on piloting little programs anymore. We may need to may need to focus on taking those programs, the successes that we've learned from them, and expanding them to the whole community, expanding them to a broader customer base. And that means things like curbside collection versus drop-off. So looking at how we can transition programs to be more universal rather than small-scale voluntary, because we need to move the needle more than we are with pilot programs. We also believe that there may be benefit in looking at outside partnerships for other ways to recycle and reuse and dispose of waste in mutually beneficial ways. We've had a lot of really productive conversations with Metro Waste Authority about their resources and our resources and ways that we might potentially partner together. We think that there are a lot of opportunities, not only with them as a partner, but with other partners that we could be looking at alternative ways to dispose of this material or recycle it in beneficial ways rather than taking it through the resource recovery system. This touches on a point that was raised earlier. We believe that it would be a good idea for us to go out and meet again with the communities that partner in the resource recovery system and discuss what their goals are and what ours are. If those communities believe that there might be a better solution for their waste and better ways for them to program how that gets handled, then I think we need to know that, because there might be an advantage in allowing them to go an alternate path while we would get the benefit of maybe reducing the amount of material that we have to process. But we need to talk to those communities to find out what their desires are. I'm certainly not discussing forcing out anybody, but I think we need to understand what the desires are of those communities. What do they want to get out of this partnership, and how can we achieve what is necessary for our utilities and their needs as well?
So do we take care of all the counties? I'm sorry, all the cities in Story County?
There are two exceptions,
Colo and Collins, we do.
Colo and Collins.
Any cities outside of Story County?
And that 2080 agreement runs till 2034?
In some communities, there are incentives or disincentives that have been applied to encourage residents to separate their materials to a greater degree than they might otherwise do. And so one of the things that we'd like to take a look at is, are there such economic incentives that we can apply? So that means making it very cheap and convenient for people to recycle materials, making it less convenient perhaps for them to throw that material in the garbage, right? Because garbage is what we have a problem with when it comes to processing and storing and disposing. So we'd like to explore a little bit more ways that we can encourage people, perhaps financially, to make a more economical choice for the whole system. And then also policies such as pay as you throw, which, as we described earlier, a couple of the haulers have implemented. This is something that could become helpful if we're trying to encourage people to dispose of garbage in alternate ways through recycling and reuse and so forth. Having them pay a higher price for larger volumes of garbage to be thrown away matches what the cost is to dispose of it, right, with the cost that there is to the customer to throw it away. We'd like to have some more conversations with our staff internally in the Water and Pollution Control Department about how the WPC facility can be better set up for organics disposal. There's a project in the CIP for expanding the receiving station at WPC.
Yes.
There's some technical issues with disposing of things that aren't really liquidy. So we need to talk more about what are the options, right, for either improvements at that facility or an alternative facility for us to be able to improve organic collection. Again, provide another option to dispose of that kind of material so that it is not in the garbage stream that goes through resource recovery and then electric. And then through a combination of strategies, we'd like to see what would it take for us to reduce the volume of RDF to the point where we could potentially combust it in Unit 7 rather than in Unit 8. You know, as Don mentioned earlier, there's some size constraints in terms of the volume of RDF that can be disposed of in Unit 7 versus Unit 8. And if we were able to achieve a certain level of diversion and alternate disposal, would it be possible for us to get that volume down of garbage or store it in some manner that would allow us to more consistently feed it and then burn it in Unit 7 instead of Unit 8? And that would save us a considerable amount of natural gas and also a considerable cost potentially. So we'd like to look at what would it take to be able to do that. That would be a change from how we're operating right now.
Do we have ideas about that based on our understanding of what goes into the RDF?
Well, it would be achieved through a combination of these kinds of things, right? Taking these materials out of the commingled trash and addressing them in a way that is more appropriate for the type of material that it is. And depending on how successful we are, then we may be able to achieve more flexibility with how we burn the RDF. We certainly know that we don't have much flexibility now, right? We far exceed the volume of RDF that can be consumed just in Unit 7 right now. So we need to explore that more. Another idea that we'd like to explore is how we can potentially not only reduce the RDF to allow it to be combusted in a more economical unit, right, with avoided natural gas, but also would there be possibilities for us to be able to store it so that we could time it better when we do combust it, so that we're not burning it at times when it would be very economical for us to purchase off the grid. We'd like to explore if there are other adjustments to the resource recovery plant equipment to improve the material separation so that we get a better, more consistent RDF product, so that we are diverting more recyclable materials out of the waste stream. Right now, of course, we're doing a pretty good job of that, but there still is always some small portion of the matter that gets either through into the RDF stream or into the reject stream that we could be doing something differently with, and recycling perhaps.
Well, before we move to the next slide, these potential strategies don't address the construction material. Could you stay on that for a second? Any
So
coming up?
construction material we talked about right there. We want to talk with Boone County Landfill and the haulers and the potential alternative facilities to figure out what else can we be doing with the construction material that right now is being taken to Boone County Landfill. Are there alternatives?
Right. Other than discuss, I mean, are there any other options? I mean, we should want lots of construction material. We have a housing shortage. So it's a good thing to have this material. It's a sign of economic development. But I don't hear anything else other than talking with Boone that we could do with this.
Well, right now, it's required that it go to Boone unless there's an arrangement made to take it someplace else. Is that right, Bill?
Correct.
So we want to talk with Boone and with the haulers about what would it, and with other potential places to take it, what would it look like if we were to have that taken to Metro Waste or to Marshalltown to get it off of Boone County so that it's not going there and filling their landfill anymore. There's trade-offs to that because that means a longer drive distance, right? So would that mean that it's not feasible to do without a transfer station for us to pack it up and then haul it to that alternative location? We have to sort out those kinds of logistics. So that's why we need to talk with those other partners to figure that out.
And one more question on this. So just so we're all on the same page. So really, there's nothing creative. No one's doing anything with this construction material. It's just landfill. Am I
there are-
correct on that? Are there any kind of
Some might be
creative things?
recycling.
There are some facilities that do C&D recycling,
Recycle.
but there aren't any.
Are you asking how it's being handled
There
now?
aren't any in the
Well,
neighborhood.
I'm just, as we
Or
think
how it could
through,
be?
so this is a topic that surfaced for me tonight as a bigger issue than I had really understood before. And I'm just curious if there are any best practices other than burying it in the ground.
No, that's what we'll be looking at. That's where we're asking you to unleash us to go. That will be one of the areas we're going to attack.
Yeah,
Come
for
back with
instance,
recommendations.
Brian talked about the partnerships, and we've had great conversations so far with Metro Waste. So that could be one of the things that we explore with them through a joint partnership, creating some type of a recycling opportunity for the C&D waste. Maybe not all of it, but certain components that we might be able to do something like that.
So Metro is able to do some more with that. They're able to capture more of that construction material and recycle it than what we're doing
Potentially,
now.
again, with economies of scale, if we were combined with a larger market such as Metro Waste, that might be something that we could be a partner in.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
If I can add one little thing to that, Curtis and I were talking about this. Curtis just built a house, and if you go out to the house site, they put in one dumpster and they throw sheetrock in there and 2x4s and nails and concrete and anything else they're breaking up. So one of the concepts is, and then they just take that whole dumpster and it's commingled and that's what you dump. But one of the concepts that some more progressive places are looking at is you separate concrete and you separate sheetrock and you separate, 2x4s and stuff like that. And so there are examples of that in other communities.
So that's really exciting. And that seems like a doable type of procedure that we could actually do sooner rather than later.
I would say if I were to build a house again, which I'm never going to do again, that I would set up contracts of saying all the cardboard goes into you gotta, and I would have to pay for that. But it's amazing, like everything new that's coming to the house comes in a cardboard box. So there's an amazing amount of cardboard in that. So yeah, it seems that the C&D is very broad as to what is included in that.
Yep, thank you for that.
And to echo onto that, Iowa State University, who is a very large player in the community, all of their construction contracts are written that way, that they will recycle the concrete, the brick, the metal. So they have recycling contracts or levels built into the contract. So to reduce the amount of construction demolition debris that does go to the landfill.
So we could have done that, for example, with the high school. That could have been part of the project, is they could have done more in the way of separating some of those materials.
And they maybe, I don't know. I know when DeCarlo deconstructed Sears down at Merle Hay Mall, they had piles of brick, piles of concrete, piles of metal. They tore that store apart. But there was insulation off the heating and ventilation system, the ceiling tiles, there were the drywall. That material does not have a ready market for it. But they separated that material off. That went to landfill. The other material they had separated off, and they had secondary markets to take it to.
Yeah, fascinating. This is really helpful. Thank you.
And let's not assume that the high school didn't do that, because it could be that what you're seeing leaving was loads of concrete and loads of brick and loads of metal. We don't know what the destination was, and it could have been that it was not all going to the landfill.
Yeah. To be fair, I was only using the example because it's a lot of trucks.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of trucks to pack up a high school.
Yeah. I mean, it's just economically, contractors don't want to pay tipping fees with concrete, brick, the heavy stuff. So they're going to find ways to try and dispose of it in ways that they are legally allowed to do. And a lot of times farmers and people who have property out in the rural areas, they want that to help reduce some of the erosion and some of the, so anyway. All right, next steps, Brian.
So this is just a list of blue sky. What kinds of ideas can we come up with to dig into that seem to align with the strategies that we talked about earlier, or the goals that we talked about earlier? So from this list, we think there are 4 things that we could tackle more immediately. So the first one is working to address how to alternatively dispose of C&D debris in Story County. Again, it's a major pain point for Boone County Landfill, it appears, based on our conversations with them over the last couple of years. A substantial amount of the construction and demolition debris that goes to Boone County Landfill is coming from Story County. And we think that there are alternatives to this that might be feasible. We need to talk with Boone County, ourselves, haulers, the construction firms, and then the other landfills that might be an alternative, and see what it would take to make a change with how this is handled moving forward. The second next step that we think is feasible in the more immediate term is for us to develop a more close relationship with Metro Waste Authority. So we've been really impressed in the last couple of months, particularly as we've talked to them more and more about the level of expertise that they bring to the table in terms of hauling, processing, landfilling, all the different components of waste handling. And we were able to tour their facility, their new recycling facility, a couple of weeks ago, and that was a very eye-opening experience. And we think we have a lot to learn, and we think we also have a lot to share with them. I think that we both viewed it as a mutually beneficial conversation. So we'd like to work with them more and pick their brain and see what resources they might be able to bring to the table for us to solve these types of challenges that we've been talking about all night long here.
What are they recycling there?
So they take commingled recycled material from curbside collection in the Des Moines metro area. They're doing about 20,000 tons a year. They opened this recycling facility in 2020, 2021,
2020,
2020, late 20,
November 20.
late 2020. And they process material there. They separate out cardboard, plastic, metals, glass, and then they're shipping it off. They're brokering the sale of that material. And it's a pretty impressive facility. And the programs that they have that work to feed into it are also pretty impressive.
We had a mayor's meeting here a few months ago down there too. The quality of the materials that they are actually recycling, they're clean enough that they're not having problems selling the plastic. And you know, when you go to a fast food place and you get a cardboard holder for cups, well, they're all made up in, I think it's Clear Lake, I think, and they only buy paper from Des Moines, the Metro Waste Authority, because the paper is so clean and is such a high quality that they know they have consistent throughput. That's the only place they buy the materials from. So they have a semi going up there. I think it's almost weekly with paper to make that product. So it's all done. So the point is, I was too very, very impressed with the technology and what they have probably the highest technological facility in the nation there, and they have a huge capacity ability to take on more stuff. And they're looking for partners too. So I think it's an exciting opportunity. I'm glad you guys had a chance to look at it. I think it's a great way to not just have stuff baled up and then go to the ocean, but actually have it being cleaned and used and being able to be processed. So it's exciting, a great partnership.
And is all of that coming from their haulers, or are they also doing the residential drop off, like for individuals?
I don't think they're doing any drop off at the facility. They do have a similar to our glass recycling program. They have collection dumpsters out in the communities for glass and then for
They
cardboard.
do it for both glass and cardboard. They have collection points within Polk County, plus the curbside that they pick up also.
And they just entered into a contract with Council Bluffs where they're going to start bringing product from Council Bluffs, I believe, also.
That may be public now.
It is now.
It is now.
No one watches
they're
these
looking at
things.
Nobody watches.
No one's watching.
So they have a great facility and it's open to the public, and they have a
They didn't say it wasn't public.
big kids museum on the top, and you can look out and watch it all happening. It's all windows. Pretty interesting.
Need a field
But-
trip.
In our conversations with them, it was pretty clear that when they're looking for partnerships, they are interested in stable partnerships with other governmental entities. So we think there's an opportunity there that if they're willing to partner with us and we'd be willing to partner with them for different ways of disposing of material, then we might be able to make something work. So the third item that we think is a more immediate next step is a pilot drop-off recycling program. The council's adopted budget for 23-24 included a description of how we wanted to work on this activity as a pilot program even before we were having this conversation tonight. So the benefits of doing this would be to give us an opportunity to learn about what kind of customer demand there might be for using a drop-off recycling program, issues with contamination, the costs, the resource needs, and so forth. We've had some, so we think that this is an opportunity to do not only the glass recycling that we have as a drop-off collection program, but also cardboard in particular. We're talking with Metro Waste about whether they would take that. We want to see how fast we could fill an 8-yard dumpster with cardboard dropped off from the community.
Come to my house, I'll help.
Yeah, well, so the king of cardboard, Curtis over there, thinks the power plant could probably fill an 8-yard dumpster itself pretty quickly. So we're gonna take a look at that. We get a lot of materials in boxes.
So on that next
Yep.
step, is this something that requires council direction, or is that something that's within your wheelhouse to just do now? Why, in other words, why wouldn't we do this now?
Why would we, or why would not?
Why wouldn't we? This seems like a logical next step that would be very little cost.
I think that there's, at the last slide is a presentation, ask for council direction on on these 4 points. So
Okay.
let's let Brian finish.
Sure.
And we can go ahead and make a decision.
So then the fourth next step is for us to talk about the next steps regarding organized collection and whether the council wants us to take further action to move that discussion ahead, or if you'd like us to work on other priorities. So in summary, it appears that among the haulers, after we've had these conversations, there is not consensus that they're excited about going to an organized collection system. Some are accepting of going that direction if the city was to go that direction, and others have objections to it.
Brian, just a point of clarification regarding no consensus. Would that also include no consensus about having 1 day a week for collection in specific areas of the community? Were they not in favor of that either?
So I think it was, I don't know how many haulers raised that suggestion, but that would be, so the suggestion that was raised by one or more haulers was divide the city into zones, allow them to continue serving the customers they happen to serve in those zones, but all the collection down your street or my street would be on the same day. I'm not sure that that really resolves a whole lot of the issues because you still have the same number of truck trips. In fact, it might even make it more difficult because now they're all coming at on the same day, maybe at the same time. The advantage is, I suppose, you have 1 day where that neighborhood might be subject to more disruption, and the other 6 days of the week, there aren't people having to dodge the garbage truck. But it doesn't really do anything to address the other issues that were presented in the staff report last year. So the truck traffic issues are all the same. The cost, the greenhouse gas emissions, those kinds of things aren't really affected by that option.
I'm just going anecdotally, my neighborhood, looking out front. I do think that there are several days a week where the same vendor is driving on a Tuesday and a Friday, or on a Monday and a Wednesday. So I would just say that might warrant a little more exploration before that was just totally thrown out, because if that could be consolidated, then ABC collection will pick up only on that day and not come back the next day and then or 2 days later. So anyway.
So, Don, are you talking about having just 1 day for your neighborhood, or eliminating the 2-a-day pickups? I mean, I'm sorry, 2 a week pickups.
No, I think my understanding was, from what was previously mentioned, was that it'd be, let's just say in my neighborhood, they would only come Mondays to pick up trash for sake of discussion. And if someone has a lot of trash, they have a large family for sake of discussion, they might have 2 containers, but they're not coming back on Monday and on Friday to pick up. They're going to just come 1 day, that week essentially.
Okay.
So it's just kind of, anyway, it would promote to me some of the efficiencies for the haulers as well too, because they're going to be in that one neighborhood once in the week versus coming back a couple of times during the week, if that's the case. But anyway.
But that's different from all of the haulers coming on the same day of the week, which is what would conceivably create the traffic issues in the neighborhood. So
Yeah, I don't know their routes. I'm just saying it's possible that the majority of the haulers do come through every day in a
Mhm.
neighborhood. That's what I'm saying, is that the point
Yeah.
is that I'm
No,
not
I
sure
get that.
I'm not sure that I don't think we have enough data to understand what it is. I just know that they are coming every day. I just don't know what the routes are essentially. So I'm just trying to encourage creativity and make sure we understand what is going on and not jump to the conclusion that if that option is thrown out, then all of a sudden, boom, everything's gonna be much better essentially, or it's gonna improve things significantly. Anyway, I beat that horse to death enough. So,
So another aspect to this is that it could be pretty difficult for us as a resource recovery and electric utility to make substantial changes to the volume of municipal solid waste and what that volume of waste is composed of when it gets to the resource recovery plant, unless the city is more involved in how the collection occurs. And that could mean a lot of different things. That could mean that the city would need to, in order to be more successful in changing the volume and the composition of the garbage, it might mean that we have to impose more requirements on the haulers. Let's say they continue to haul as they do, but maybe we require them to implement pay-as-you-throw, and they have to weigh the containers, or they have to charge different rates, or we have to require curbside recycling. We have to ban recyclable materials in garbage, things like that, different policy choices. Without the city being more involved in how that works on the collection side, it's going to be a challenge to address what we end up receiving on the tipping floor and then in the power plant.
So I think you made your point very well tonight. I initially wasn't completely convinced that these are intertwined, but they certainly are. And would you be recommending to council, it almost seems like we need to figure out what we're doing with the waste before we make decisions with respect to how the waste is picked up. Am I hearing that as a recommendation? Or can they be done? I'm nervous about changing the way in which we pick up the waste and inadvertently do something that we're not anticipating on the other side.
I
How
don't
would you
know that you'd
recommend?
have to do one before the other. I think that if the council said, okay, we want to influence how the material is getting into a trash can and a recycling bin and so forth out in the field, and you told us to go do that with 7 haulers and to do that in a consistent and uniform way across the city with those 7 different haulers, all collecting in the same areas and so forth. That's a tall order compared to doing that where we have a contract with the haulers and we can specifically put in performance measures and things that we desire out of that process.
Okay.
We also recognize that there is risk if the city was to move forward with a system where we just had one contract hauler, say, serve the community, because we're susceptible to changes in pricing in the contract and a lack of alternatives if we're not satisfied with how that provider is providing the service. Challenges with that provider being able to provide the labor or the equipment or the materials that are necessary to serve the whole community. So that's why we're continuing to not recommend moving forward with a system where we basically have one hauler serving all residential customers in the community. One of the concerns that we initially had about doing a zone bidding process was that we weren't sure how we would address different prices for different customers in different parts of the cities. You know, if you were served by one hauler over on the west side of town and the east side of town was served by another hauler and they had bid different prices, then there'd be different, different residents paying different prices for essentially the same service. We think that we have a potential alternative where we could bid the zones to the haulers and then have the city handle the billing and the payment and so forth for the haulers. The haulers would charge the bid price that they bid to the city, and we would evenly spread those costs. So the cost would become to the resident would become the average cost. I mean, we experience this right now with other utilities, right? So in electric service, it doesn't necessarily cost exactly the same amount for us to extend lines to one house as it does to the other, but they're still charged at the same rate because we spread those costs around among the rate class. So this would be a similar concept. It would allow the possibility that there would be more haulers in the community. We could put provisions into the bidding documents that indicate that we believe as a policy, it would be advantageous to the community to have more than one hauler, to have several haulers serve the community, and to have alternatives available in the event that one hauler can't perform, or they go out of business, or have some other sort of customer service issue, for example. We could put provisions into this kind of a bid that would prevent one hauler from simply underbidding everybody else and essentially taking all of the zones. So indicating, for example, that one hauler can't control more than, say, 60% or 50% or some percentage of the zones. So we have some ability in this kind of a system, if the council wanted, we could implement those kinds of provisions to essentially keep as many haulers in the community as want to participate and can participate. But the downside is that this kind of model, we're impacting customer choice. So unfortunately, there are not a whole lot of models out there where we can achieve some of the things we're talking about, where customers are able to keep the exact same hauler and shop around for them and continue to do things exactly the way they have for years and years and years. We're talking about changes in the system.
Though if there were a hauler that were vastly underperforming for a zone they had bid for, there would be some feedback mechanism, I hope, right? Where the next time we put out a bid, we clarify the service, whatever the issue is with the service they're providing or something like that.
Sure. So the way this works, for example, in the Metro Waste Authority group, right? So they have basically this same kind of a system, except it's city by city instead of neighborhood by neighborhood, which is what we're talking about. So if they have an issue with one hauler in one of the cities, not showing up and providing the service on the day they're supposed to, for example, they can send in a different hauler to go and pick that up. And there's consequences in the contract for the hauler that underperformed, for the hauler that didn't provide the services that are required. One of the things Metro requires that's interesting is they have all of the haulers take a picture of the can as they go by. And so if a customer calls and says, you didn't pick up my can, they can go back and find the picture and say, well, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Or, yep, it was, and it wasn't picked up. So again, this is another one of the lessons that I think we can draw from the Metro Waste experience and try to figure out how to make this work. But this isn't really inventing something totally new. I think this is something that there is an example for. But I get that the trade-off is customer choice, and it's not necessarily what the haulers are excited about.
Yeah.
So
Well, and you didn't put down the impact on the business model for the current haulers either as well, too.
We don't know exactly.
I just wanted to say again, I think this is a very complicated system, and I'm just concerned that there's a lot of details, moving parts, and we're just not in the trash business, in terms of understanding how all those things, work. And it's just, and we haven't heard from really our residents yet to hear, what their feedback might be too. But yeah, go
You
ahead.
mean as far as the collection system you're pointing out?
Yeah, and we're not getting into it as a city. I get that.
Right.
But it's going to fall to staff to be doing a lot of this stuff, and it's just we don't understand how that works. But anyway,
Well, luckily, other models exist. So, like Brian said, the whole metro area is using a scaled up concept of the same thing. And they've been doing it for a while. So, there'll be lessons we can take from them.
And I just had a general question. Since city would be handling billing and contract performance, have you thought about the impact, like additional staff or what that billing system might look like? Or that's down the road if we choose that one?
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at it in more detail. We've had some really early conversations about how that might work. We are implementing something that's a twist on that model for billing in areas where we have Xenia water serving that we're going to grow into. So we know that there are areas that Xenia is going to provide the water. We're going to provide the sewer. We may or may not be providing electric. I don't think we are, but and then we've got storm sewer charges, right? So we already have worked out, what is it going to take for us to get information from Xenia so that we can then bill the customer and collect the money and pay Xenia. This would be something we think it wouldn't be significantly disruptive for our billing program. We'd have to figure out, we think there's some slight additional administrative costs to do it. But it would allow the haulers to get out of the business of having to deal with billing, to deal with collections, to deal with delinquency and all those kinds of things. They'd just be getting a check for however many accounts times the collection fee once a month.
Sure.
And then we would handle all those other responsibilities. So there is more that we would have to look into for implementing this, of course, but we've already had some preliminary discussions about that.
Great. Okay, thank you.
So what we're looking for is direction from the council about these 4 prospective next steps. Our impression is that the council probably doesn't have any objection to us pursuing 1 through 3, but we need to know a little bit more about your thoughts regarding next steps for organized collection. So I want to make clear we've got a question that's planned to go out or a series of questions planned for the resident satisfaction survey. So we'll get more information from the community about their interest in a different collection model, but that won't come for a couple of months. We think that pursuing any of this regarding organized collection is going to take some time for us to explore further and flesh out details. So we would think that in the next several months, if the council was interested in this, we would start gathering information about what kinds of questions would we need to answer if we were to issue an RFP for zones, for organized collection. What kind of expertise can we get from Metro Waste Authority? And then what kind of feedback can we collect from the community about their interest in this concept? So surveys, meetings with the community, with residents to get their take on this concept and how it might work. In addition to any other feedback the haulers might be able to present us in the next couple of months as well.
So I have one additional question about perhaps another step, or maybe it goes with item 2. We know that Metro Waste Authority recycles and then supplies an end user with those recycled materials. Have we thought about investigating whether we could attract any of those end users to Ames so that we actually have a market that's even local or close to local with the supplier of the materials and the users of the materials?
Not sure.
No.
Not sure, Richard. No.
We have an industrial park that needs businesses. And I'm just wondering what sorts of businesses there might be that are out there that could be end users for recycled materials that would enable us to create a closer cycle of recycling within central Iowa here, instead of, for example, going to Clear Lake with the materials from Metro Waste. That's
we haven't-
just another thing that I think we're not talking about that could be an opportunity. Maybe it's not. Maybe most of those end users are also big water users, or they don't
Yeah.
have a lot of employees. I don't know. But it seems like it's something that we should be talking about, since we want to attract more businesses to Ames anyway. Is that a direction that we could explore?
It's probably, it'd probably be secondary to get our overall strategic plan. Our goal is to get the strategic plan on how to handle garbage, how we're going to handle garbage in the city of Ames and Story County in the next 20 or 30 years. So I think there'll be a byproduct of it, and maybe a second phase to that. Before you speak about this, I want to emphasize what you've heard today from staff, because it's a significant policy, a philosophical policy change. You've heard it. In the past, and that's how we did just a few months ago, we were trying to help the electric utility, thinking we don't want to burn garbage anymore in there. We want to burn it someplace else, right? We're trying to do that as a goal. And our concept was always, let's build another plant to burn the same amount of garbage and maybe handle garbage that continues to grow. Maybe it's because we took those bids or that study and we found out we're talking about $120 to $180 million project. That's not financially feasible, I don't believe, for the citizens or residents of Story County as we begin our implementation of our sustainability plan, just for that one step. That's a big move right there. So that's forcing us to change. If you hear what the staff's saying for the first time, we're always going to be in the front. Susan, everybody else going to be in the front of reduce and reuse, but we want to get more aggressive in keeping the materials out of the waste stream, not to become garbage, not to burn. So we want to recycle, right? In many different ways. That's a strong emphasis on that. So really we're trying to reduce, we have about 50,000 gross tons that come into the system all the time. We are committing to come up with a system that will reduce that, to eliminate that going into the system through recycling and reusing materials. That's a significant change in philosophy. And even though there may be some capital improvements required to retool the resource recovery plant or build new facilities, it's going to be, we believe, significantly cheaper than building that separate facility at $180 million. So that's a big change. Now, a component of that is going to be the collection system, right? And the haulers have to be partners in this. And I think they want to be, and they'll help us do that. You're going to have to decide on the organized system. It was my recollection that the dialogue about the organized system began, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, predominantly with the sustainability issue about multiple trucks driving all over the same routes all over the city multiple times. Massive use of carbon, right? And then you told us to explore different options. Brian gave a good report on the organized system. But as we've tried to point out, good research by the staff and input from the haulers, there are significant negative aspects of an organized hauling system. So you're going to have to decide what you want to do. And what you're hearing is this is a complex issue, not the hauler, but this whole plan that we have to put together. Now, Don wants this done tomorrow, but it's going to take a bit longer to put this together. But we got to get started on it, right? Because it's going to take time. We don't want to throw out the possibility of working with Legal Energy either. Maybe there's something there in that partnership, because that partnership doesn't require us to make a $180 million investment. But Berkshire Hathaway might understand that we're trying to put less garbage into the system than more. So we're going to be a part of it, but we can't be the only one that participates in contributing to that, right? It's going to be a big regional operation. We just have to look at all options. And that's what it's going to take. But we don't want to, now we're going to look for a strategy, put together a basic strategy. There are going to be some short-term pilot programs that we can start proving out some of these concepts. So it's kind of exciting, but it's a major shift and a philosophical shift that you're hearing from staff for the first time. And it's going to be hard for you on this on the organized hauler system, because you're going to have to weigh the positives and the negatives. But you could give us direction tonight. If there's a sense you're uncomfortable with it, we could come back again. It's not going to be any easier, but we want to get started on something. We can wait on this because it's always tough to put you on the spot on that. But there's certain aspects of the organized system you're going to have to give us some direction on. And again, the hauling or the collection is just one component of the overall strategy, right? But they're integrated. You saw that, right? For the first time, we're seeing how they're integrated, very much integrated.
Brian, is there a fifth step that would involve conversation with Berkshire Hathaway or Lincoln Way Energy? Is that another step also, or is that tied in with one of these other ones?
Yeah, I think that's still happening, as is finalizing the report from Sergeant Lundy. So I think we're still planning on moving those forward.
Yeah.
And we'll report to you as we get more
Berkshire
information.
Hathaway, I think, is going to try to put together some numbers, at least to understand. There's going to be costs back because we're going to be purchasing, and the PPA would be purchasing energy back. Well, how much is that going to cost versus other alternatives?
Right.
That gets with Tim's, financial feasibility. So we have to look at all those things.
One other point I want to make, and Steve touched on it. So the idea here of tying together the cradle to grave of the garbage and ways that we can avoid the capital investment that appeared was going to be necessary as part of the waste to energy study. That's important here, because if we can avoid having to invest that substantial hundreds of millions of dollars worth of capital, that frees up a lot more possibilities for the council to achieve things like your climate initiatives and where we're getting energy from, other things. If we have to spend over $100 million on a waste to energy system, the new generation of waste to energy system, because we haven't impacted the source of the waste, then our options moving forward are going to be a lot more limited.
But let me not mislead anybody. As we increase the level of services, there's going to be a cost to that too, to the customer. You and I, as homeowners, are going to have to pay a little bit more for these services. You understand? We don't have recycling now. There's a cost to that. So you have to be willing to pay for it, right? But we pay for it probably in monthly bills and such. You'll get a better level of service. It'll be better for the environment, but there'll be an investment there, probably not in a capital investment, but maybe an operating cost that each of us will have to bear as business owners, homeowners, right?
All right. So is council, are you supportive of, as Brian indicated, 1, 2, and 3 in terms of continuing that conversation? There's no need to really discuss that, or is there anything you want to add to?
Do you want a motion just to? 1, 2,
Sure.
and 3?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would move that we direct staff to proceed with at least goals 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Mayor, it would be helpful. Remember all the strategies that Brian put out? Do you think we're on the right path there? It's the first time you saw some of those. They're not going to happen tomorrow, but again, it's a different approach how we want to handle dealing with garbage. So is there a kind of a consensus we're on the right path with that new philosophy?
Mhm.
Okay. And then how about the fourth step?
So I have a question, Mayor. Are we going to take any public input on this issue? I mean, would there be value in having that? I don't know how many people would be interested in addressing that, but
Yeah, I've kind of been going back and forth in my mind. It kind of depends upon what council is giving direction. I mean, if there's a more finality and direction, I think absolutely. But it's more or less just saying, continue in with the conversation. You want to do some more exploration. You're going to seek public input. They're going to be engaged more with the haulers in terms of, dialogue. then to me, that would be the natural place for that to go ahead and go on. But I'm not sure I read where the council's at right now in terms of, making a decision tonight.
On the organized.
Right.
So one thing that I think came up in the staff report was our current municipal code says that haulers should have the ability to do 2 runs a week if customers want it. And I would like to make a motion that we amend the code so that it does not require that haulers make 2 runs a week.
Second.
Okay. Mark, procedurally, is this going to,
That'll be placed in the future.
should it be placed
Be
on
a future
should it
agenda.
be on a future agenda versus being, is it
Second.
germane? I mean, I know it's germane, but not, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just place it on a future agenda.
Okay, so I would move that we place the discussion of, I guess I have to withdraw my previous motion. But I would move that we place on a future agenda the discussion of reducing the requirement for 2 collection days a week.
I'll still second you.
Those,
And I would be supportive of this, but if someone's livelihood depends on, in some ways, is impacted by that second run, I want to at least take that into account. So
That's on the future agenda.
yeah, that would give a good chance for people to come in and give input on that. Yeah. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
So if there's not a sense of being comfortable with answering questions about right now, making a decision on organized, at least, Brian, you want to go over maybe the kind of questions we will ask you in the future
You mean,
about the organized? If you don't want to give direction now,
well, your suggestion was good. I mean, if we are in favor of proceeding with the concept, to give staff just direction to continue, but you want more specifics than that.
because we need to know, like, what services would you want haulers to provide? It's not telling us today, but do you want them to provide services for organics, yard waste, recycling, those kind of things? Pay as you throw. Should we charge more for the large containers? Those kind of things. Frequency of pickup, twice a week, once a week only. The number of haulers, what do you want to do by zones, one hauler, or keep it the way it is? We need to know about things like that.
It would seem a lot of those are, to me, I think, as I've heard the conversation, the big question is, are you going to go to bidding out zones and having just one hauler per zone?
Yes.
To me, that is the big question, because I think it talks to,
Yes.
the enterprise aspect of people, and also the limiting choice of people not being able to.
Yeah,
That's the big.
I think those other issues, I think the haulers we could agree with, that we can work out. But you're right. And again, if you're not prepared to answer that, we can come back at a future date, but sooner the better, right?
So
Yeah,
would it be, I'm just trying to understand how precise the motion would be, because I'm willing to start the conversation. Would it be sufficient to ask staff to place zone bidding on a future agenda? And then we could tease out some of these different alternatives. These were very interesting tonight, but those
Different
could be
models and
options.
Brian has.
Yeah,
But at least put it on an agenda.
I think we could come back to you with a discussion of the potential models, and then the questions that we would need direction regarding from the city council, and we could provide you with maybe what we think is a preferred direction or a recommended.
The other issues are only relates
Right,
to
on those individual issues,
Yep.
the services provided and number of zones.
Is that a conversation then that we have before or after we get the feedback from the
survey.
survey? Yeah.
Survey won't. When we have that, Susan.
That'll be here before we know it.
I'm just asking because Tim hasn't made the motion yet, so I don't know whether that's.
Yeah, and
I don't remember all the questions. Would they speak to frequency of hauling? Does it speak to only one hauler? Does it satisfy that information for the council?
So here's what I'd propose. I think if you wanted to, you could give us direction to come back to you after we've collected some feedback from the community. We can prepare surveys or focus groups or whatever we need to do, and we'll come up with a plan and collect feedback from the community. We'll meet with the haulers again to see if there's any further thoughts after having had this conversation. We will review the feedback from the resident satisfaction survey, and then we'll come back to you with a list of the questions where we will need answers from you about the different components to include or not include, or the different options that would be included if you wanted us to proceed with organized collection with an RFP, including the recommended direction that we as staff would propose you go with in answering those different components. Is that?
So when do you think that would be, though? That's going to take you a little time then, right?
Yeah, I think we'd be looking at the end of the summer,
August?
around the time, yeah, or shortly after when we get that feedback from the survey. That would give us time to collect the feedback from the haulers and the community and anybody else, and we can talk with Metro Waste and see how.
Yeah, we have those other items, 1 through 3, we could start working on too.
Yeah, 1 through 3, we're working on right away.
Is that all right with everybody?
So would that require a motion, or is that?
Yeah.
Whatever
So,
Brian said.
yeah, I move that we direct staff to pursue the investigation for item number 4.
A second?
Okay. You can probably get the specifics that Brian talked. I think you're basically interested in what he was talking about too, right? Yeah. Thank you. All right. Everyone stand in motion? Those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Mayor, I would be interested. We have a number of people that came to the meeting tonight. They've heard us have this discussion. I would be interested in hearing if someone came tonight and they would like to speak to this. I would like to hear that.
All right. Open up public feedback. Okay. If you want to come up and introduce yourself, and if you could try and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less, and 3 minutes if you can.
My name's Taylor Eichinger. Me and my brother Clinton are the owners of Garbage Guys, and thank you guys for your time, and thank you for all the information. This gentleman over here, second in from the right, I'm not sure what his name is. It looks like it's Tim. I can't appreciate more of what you had to say about your worries about the haulers and what we've invested as companies. And, you guys are sitting here throwing around $200 million numbers. We've invested around $2.5 million into the city of Ames. I've got a couple other haulers sitting back there that, it seems like they feel the way that I do. And honestly, it scares the hell out of me to be a business owner and a garbage operator in the city of Ames right now, just based on the talks that you guys are having. It's doing this job every day. Some of the stuff that you guys have been speaking to, the resource and recovery plant, last October, from October to when was that thing shut down? It was shut down for a good 6-8 months. All of that garbage is going to the Boone landfill and it's getting buried. You guys are sitting here talking about Metro Waste Authority. I go there every day. I do all my stuff down south from Ankeny south. That's where I operate. I run a really, really big roll-off business as well as a really big residential business. They bury all of their stuff down at Metro Waste Authority. If you guys are talking about taking stuff from a transfer station from here to Metro Waste Authority, all of that's getting buried in the landfill. And I can assure you of that for 100% fact. I think you guys are onto some really good ideas with the construction and demolition, recycling. That's a huge place that you guys are, every time you go, and I've been to Bill's place many a time with construction debris, and they turn me right out the door, and you're going to the Boone County landfill to bury it. You guys really do need a construction, demolition, recycling center. And one thing that my brother and my mom can vouch for is I'm actually working on I'm in the process of starting a recycling center for construction and demolition. It's something that we do all of DR Horton's roll-offs. They're the biggest home builder in America. You guys are talking about how much new stuff is getting buried all the time. It's incredible. It's honestly incredible. I'm not the greenest person in the world. You seem like you're really into sustainable stuff. There's a big opportunity for that, and there's a huge opportunity to make money. If that's something you guys are interested in being a sustainable, carbon neutral place, I would love to participate in that with you. I've got some ideas that we can take this construction and demolition and we can become carbon neutral. Story County itself can become carbon neutral. This isn't by going through a $200 million plant. This is about getting guys on the ground, separating out these loads, doing what's right. But the reason people aren't doing what's right is because there's not enough bang for the buck. In all reality, recycling has died because there is not enough money in recycling. We all have to put food on our table, and that's one main concern that I'm up here, and I'm sure you can hear my voice shaking. I don't want to be up here. I don't want to be in front of all you guys, but I'm fighting for my business, and that's, honest to God, and that's why I'm here. And, we started with 500 customers 5 years ago in Huxley and Slater, Iowa, and we're up past 10,000 customers now. And a lot of that is due to the city of Ames. When you guys had Chitty here, nobody was coming into your guys' town. It was Chitty, and that was pretty much it. Now that they're gone, like Bill said, you got 6-7 different haulers. We bought another company since then. We bought Tom Walter's company because we were growing so vastly, because we had the chance to do that. And if you guys do this, where you guys go to this zoning and stuff like that, it's gonna take companies like mine, and you're gonna cut us off right at that number that we're at. Hopefully, we stay at that number. Like I said, we've invested $2.5 million just into your city alone, in trucks, employees, in garbage cans. We got $250,000 sitting in just garbage cans on your guys' streets right now. I really do like the idea of you guys saying you guys can only come on Thursday to pick up garbage. I do like your idea of saying, one pickup day per week. I hope you guys know your citizens. I know them pretty well because we deal with them on a daily basis every single day. There's people who need more than that. There's people who create a lot of garbage who do need, if you're going to limit it to one day, they might need 4 garbage cans. And that's not a joke. There's people with 6 kids in their house. I think you guys do have some good ideas, but it just honestly scares the living hell out of me to be a business owner and a garbage operator in this town right now. And I guess the one question I do have for you guys is, do I keep telling our customers yes when they call? If a guy like you calls, do I say, yep, Tim, we'll drop a can off tomorrow, knowing that you guys are all working on a zoning deal where, Taylor, you're going to have to come pick up that can in August? It's 3 months away, So it's just something that it absolutely scares the hell out of me. I hope you guys keep open collection. It's something that has provided my family, the chance to, start a business and stay alive and keep that business going. And, I heard someone say that, everyone down south in the Polk County area is doing this Metro Waste Authority deal. Ankeny actually shot down that Metro Waste Authority whole contract. They do their recycling through them, but their garbage collection is all still through open pickup. And that's because it does provide the best price, and it does provide the best service for these customers who can go out and seek who they want to seek. The other question I do have for you guys is, you say you want to put on recycling, garbage pickup, and organic waste pickup. I don't know if this includes yard waste as well. So that's 3 different pickups. You guys are also saying you want to do a pickup on one single day. You want how many different trucks on that road to pick up 3 different things? One truck has to pick up garbage. You can't mix the waste. You just heard these gentlemen talk about it the entire time we were in here. One person has to pick up the yard waste, and then one person has to pick up the recycling. That puts 3 trucks at one person's house on one single day, instead of just that one truck. And like we did this year, we used to pick up yard waste every single week. We switched it to every other week just because it's too much. gas goes to $5 a gallon. You can't go drive out to 400 houses with only 10 people that have yard waste out because it's the middle of summer in Iowa and it's 100 degrees. There's no yard waste to pick up. So those are things that we are, as haulers, trying to make changes to and do stuff like that. We do use a routing system. We do have cameras on our trucks where we do take pictures of cans that aren't out for sake of a customer saying, hey, no one got my garbage today. Well, sorry, your garbage was out at noon. Here's the picture. But I just plead with you guys, honestly, to keep open pickup and keep it fair. You guys, I really don't think the city of Ames wants to get in bed with a Berkshire Hathaway. That company will turn Ames into a landfill. And from the sounds of it, that's what you guys are talking about. They're gonna come in here and they need so much waste from Story County, in which you guys don't even produce enough waste to keep that plant going. You're gonna be taking Boone County's garbage from their landfill and bringing it to Ames. What's that gonna do for the sustainability of the roads? What's that gonna do for your carbon emissions? I mean, so that is my plea with you guys, and I hope, I hope it doesn't fall on deaf ears, and I hope you guys can level with a business owner that's done business in your town for the last 5 years. And I started with nothing here, and from the sounds of it, you have 17,000 homes. We have 2,500 of them, and some of the biggest property managers in town. So I know my company's doing something right. We just want to continue to do what's right in the city of Ames and just keep operating. And is that a question you guys can answer for me, is how soon, if you guys did do this, would this happen? Because companies like mine, and I know there's a couple other guys sitting in the back there that don't have waste management, and that we aren't Aspen and we aren't Ankeny Sanitation. Do we keep saying yes to these customers that want to sign up? Because we sign up 15 to 20 new accounts in Ames a week. This last week we had 15 new starts on last Thursday in the city of Ames. That's 15 new people that called garbage guys that wanted to sign up with us. Next week, should I tell those 15 people no? Is that a question you can answer for me, Mayor?
I don't think that we have an answer for that question at this point. Brian, do you have any comment?
No,
Thank you, Taylor. I certainly, you had good comments. I certainly gave you a lot more than 3 minutes. Anything
I
else?
appreciate that, sir.
Anything
Thank
else you want to mention before?
I don't.
Okay.
I would love some of your guys' time, and I don't know how to get any of your guys' time. I'm
So-
not familiar with this stuff,
so
but I
if you
would
go on
love
our-
to talk to you guys about
if you go on the website-
construction and demolition recycling. And I'm sorry to cut you off, sir.
No, just if you have comments on construction and demolition stuff, talk to Brian or talk to Bill, and then they can
I'd love to.
talk to staff.
I'd love to.
And all of our phone numbers and emails are on the website, so you're welcome to.
And is there any way I can get in a discussion where it's not something where I only have 3 minutes to sit here and talk to you guys?
Well, I gave you 10 minutes tonight, so.
Well, I appreciate that. It went by way too quick.
I think we'd have to go ahead. Why don't you contact me and let me know what you want to talk about
I
first,
will.
okay?
How do I get a hold of you?
My email and phone number are on the website. Just go to mayor and city council, and I'm on the very top of the list.
I appreciate that.
All
sir.
right. Thanks,
for your
Taylor.
time, guys.
You bet.
I appreciate it.
And actually, after we're going to take a break here in a few minutes, Taylor, if you want to get a hold of Bill or talk to Brian about, after we take a break, you can go ahead and coordinate with talking. Anybody else want to offer comments?
Jason Ignell, Walter Sanitary Service. I've been in Ames 10 years, and it takes 7 companies during department turnovers to handle all the turnover. It takes all of us. So, it sounds good that you're going to have one hauler get it all, but the plant won't accept none of the mattresses and all that. So, it's separate trucks. And as far as the roads, our trucks are, rear loader, what we use over here, they're like 28,000 pounds empty. You bring in big automateds and pack them out, you're going to be up 55,000 pounds on your roads, and your roads on your residentials are pretty much asphalt and not concrete.
Mm-hmm.
So, as long as you live at the first part of the route, your road's going to be fine. But what about if you're at the back half of the route? So just some concerns I had, and we'd like to see it stay the same.
So just a point of clarification. So I think what you're saying is if one truck is coming through to try and do one zone during a day, you're going to have a big truck and that's going to get packed pretty heavy.
Yeah, I
that
mean,
correct?
if they go to the one hauler option and, it becomes about productivity instead of customer service, that's exactly what's going to happen. And then if the plant shuts down and have to divert to Boone, I don't know how someone's going to do it all, because all that time you got away from unloading. So,
Got it.
all right. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm Carl with Aaron Sanitation. I just have the comment of the carbon footprint that you guys are trying to, right? What about the UPS, the Amazon, the dump trucks? How many dump trucks come up from Des Moines, comes through, Ames and goes up to Martin Marietta to, get the gravel and then comes back down through Dayton. So the carbon footprint, you're going to have to do a lot more than just, our trucks are not that polluted. We all have fairly new trucks. They all have the exhaust that has filters on them, which actually helps with the carbon footprint, I believe. I'm fairly new with the new DEF stuff because I've only got one truck that uses that. the DFF, I've only got one truck that uses that, but the other trucks that I do have the same type of filter system, and then it's like $2,000 for this filter that we have to put on the exhaust. The cost is, but in everything else, you go with one hauler and it's gonna, in zones. I don't know how that's going to work because of the fact that, I'm just a small company. 1,500 customers is probably what I've got in the city of Ames. I've got stuff outside of the city of Ames, but 1,500. So if we go with a zone, you got 1,500 carts that we have to figure out what we're going to do with to clean. I mean, the cost of cleaning them, is just going to add up. And I know 2,000, whatever he said he had for customers, if he has to transfer that all to one zone, you're not going to take a dirty cart from one zone, from one place and move it to another one. So you've got to wash those carts. I know there's a guy that does cart washing, but it's like $10 to $20 per cart that he washes out. So it's just going to add up. I just want you guys to think of all the extra costs that it's going to be. And I would prefer, if we could do it like a small, group. Unfortunately, I know it's like almost 8:30. I get up at midnight. So I'm not going to get much sleep tonight. I'm going to park my truck, pick up at home, shop, sleep in the pickup for a couple hours, and get back up and go to work. So I just hope that you guys really think of all the other things that, are involved. And I know there's a lot involved. And Bill says, there's a lot, and you even said, that there was a lot involved, and you guys are in the truck. Get up some morning with us, and I'm more willing to let you ride in my truck with me. You guys can actually see what it's all about. I mean, I'm sure the other guys will have no problem either. You guys can all ride along. You'll see what it's like to pick up trash. And the recycling, I thought the resource recovery plant was a recycling center here. That's what we tell all of our customers. And they're excited because they don't have to separate that trash. You probably disagree, right?
If only it were that easy.
but to get people to separate, and I'm taking up more time than I'm supposed to, but to get people to separate, we still can't get people to separate their yard waste and not throw their yard waste in their trash cans. How are you going to get them to stop doing all the rest of this stuff? It's going to be impossible. I mean, the residents around here, and the yard waste has been separating for what, 20 years or something like that? And you still can't get them to stop. And when we first started doing the construction stuff, and I'm taking up more time, I'm sorry. We first started doing the construction stuff. When we were taking it to Boone, we had to keep all the cardboard and paper and plastic out of it. Well, it got to be to the point where we take over so many contaminated loads that we'd have to load that up and put it back in our dumpsters when we got over there. So you're going to have the same problem when it comes to it, going on. It's almost impossible to get the residents. I mean, garbage has gone up because of cardboard. Most of it's cardboard because of Amazon, food deliveries, and all that other stuff. It's just going to continue to go up. And I think that's about it.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks.
Guys, I know I'm speaking out of turn here, but the last thing that I do want to mention is all these garbage companies in here did pick up for you guys during the pandemic. And that is something we did not take a single day off of during that pandemic. And if you guys do go to that zoning deal or go to a one carrier city contract, I wouldn't be surprised to see some troubles arise with that. I think a big reason that people like us do show up to work every day because we still do have to pay the bank. I mean, it's either go to work or declare bankruptcy and not have a single thing to your name and never be able to get a loan and operate again. So that is one thing that I just really see as a huge thing that we did do that. I mean, at the start of that pandemic, there was people putting on plastic gloves. There was people using gallons of hand sanitizer. There was people who would not go out of their homes, and we were there picking up those people's trash. And a lot of those people are in Ames, Iowa. So
Thank
that
you.
is the last thing I will say, and thank you guys for
Thank
your
you.
time. I'm sorry.
All right. We will close public input tonight. We will, thank you for coming. And anything else, Ryan, that you need from council tonight? You good?
That's enough.
All right.
So,
Sure.
Mayor, I appreciate everybody coming, and I know I speak for council, that the trash haulers are not the enemy, right?
Right.
So we appreciate during the bitterest cold days of the winter, during the hottest days of the summer, you're getting it done. So, this is having some public input tonight, gave us an opportunity to put a human face on this subject. So we appreciate you guys coming in tonight.
Very good. Carl, Tim will be out there in about an hour and a half to just
Okay.
check on your truck. How's that sound?
There we go.
All right. All right. We're going to go ahead and take a short break before we move on to our next item workshop. All right. We'll move on to the next item. Corey.
Good evening. Good to see everybody. We are here tonight to talk about basically a transposition error that occurred as part of one of our utility billing rates. Tonight I have John Odenweller with me. He's our utility customer services supervisor manager, I believe. So John's ultimately responsible for sending out the bills and collecting significant source of sums that come to the city. So he's here tonight to help me answer any questions we might have. But essentially what happened was I mentioned a transposition error. We have several different rates within the city for water rates. We have a summer and winter rate. We have usage rates. We have meter rates. And so ultimately, a couple weeks ago, or I guess on the 11th now, we identified that one of the rates had been entered incorrectly back in June of 2021, which occurred because that was the last time we increased water rates. So we'll, I think our budget included a increase in water rates of 8% coming up in July. So June would make sense about the time they last entered in those numbers. Ultimately, the base rate or the minimum rate for the meter charge was entered in as $10.52 instead of $105.20 for the winter minimum water rate and the summer minimum irrigation rate. What that means is that for a customer that, I guess we'll just talk about the maximum impact because that's probably most relevant. But for a customer who was a water customer, a water meter customer for the full duration of the time frame, they were underbilled about $1,420. If you were a irrigation customer, you were underbilled for 8 months of service, which amounts to $757. So that's over that full 15-month and 18-month time span, depending on what type of meter you were utilizing. I think the end result and the thing that really got our attention was that the impact of this error resulted in under collection by roughly $580,000. And obviously that's a significant number for a water utility whose annual revenues are about $11 million. So that's why we're here tonight. We pointed out a couple options for the council to consider. One, of course, is to immediately bill all the customers for the underbilled amount. Probably not preferable given the significant impact that would have on a utility bill, particularly given the fact that the council's considered 2 readings of a water ordinance increasing water rates by 8%. So that on top of that bill would be probably fairly significant. The other thing that we provided in the council action form was a possibility of allocating that underbilling amount over a number of years. And I think in the council action form, we had recommended the 5-year schedule for the underbilling amount. And really, we looked at that with the manager's office and felt that that was probably the least impactful. When we look at the average utility bill for water customers of $191, it's about $23. And so if we were to break that up over 60 periods evenly by month, would minimize the impact. The other alternative is that we don't collect it and we waive charges. So there's a myriad of options for the council to consider. I think the general impact is that there's 278 customers that were underbilled, and they were underbilled as a result of a transposition error that we made back in 2021.
And what customers are there? What were those customers?
Type of customers?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're largely large apartment complexes or large big box retail stores, which sounds great, except for the fact that many of these locations have a lot of meters, and the meter charge is based on the number of meters you have. So the variety of impact ranges significantly based on how many meters you have at that individual location.
Corey, I have a question. So I want to think about the equity a little bit. So the idea of spreading this out over 5 years seems like a more humane way of spreading the pain out over a little more time. But let's say owner A is there for 1 year, they move out, owner 2 moves in, and yet they're going to experience the higher rate for the balance of the 5 years. How is that fair to owner 2?
Yeah. So I think our proposal was on individual customer accounts, not on the meter itself. So if you were customer A and you decided to move out, we would work with you to say, well, actually, you were underbilled by $1,420. You've paid 70% of it. You still owe the remaining 30%. How would you like to pay that? Would you like to pay it with your final utility bill, applying your deposit? Would you like to for us to send you a miscellaneous receivable over the remaining duration of the period? So it wouldn't be passed customer to customer. It would be specifically to that individual customer.
Okay.
Because they're the one that incurred the
He's going to
charge.
try to collect, if people move before the 5 years, before they close out their account, they're going to have to pay in full, pay up the rest of the money, the remaining balance.
And the thought behind that is
Understand?
customer A was the one that was underbilled, not customer B coming in at the conclusion.
So Tim, is your question like you said there's apartment complexes, big box stores,
Yeah.
commercial accounts.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, who's paying the meter charge? Is it the landlord who owns the complex
Usually the tenant.
or the tenants? So the point is that
Locate that tenant.
I think I understand. I think I get what you're saying is that so will future tenants, will students have to pay this surcharge?
They won't under this model.
Right.
But we're gonna have the student be asked to pay for that.
But the point is,
Make sure you
Because they were
clarify.
underbilled.
Yeah. So these are large apartment complexes, and we looked at like the top 10, and we just checked their website. We didn't have any conversation with them just to try and gain information. And in those areas, it says that the tenant pays the electric bill, and the apartment complex pays the water and sewer bill. Now, we can't say that that's the case for every one of these scenarios, obviously, but when we looked at let's just say the top 10 who were the most significantly impacted customers, that was the case, that the actual apartment complex or the owner of the apartment complex was paying for that utility, the water utility.
so the point being is if they were to sell that complex to somebody else,
Yes,
they would
right.
have to go ahead and basically make the city whole for what was ever underpaid
Right.
before it was transferred. Is that right?
And we should say this is all commercial customers. There's no individual
Residential.
that's
residential
helpful.
meters. Yes. Sorry, we should have clarified that.
So when I was looking at this, I was thinking, well, why don't we go for 3 years? And then I read the recommendation for 5. And I think what I was thinking at 3 is that you avoid one of the rate increases. Because if you go for 5 years, there are 2 rate increase periods in there. Whereas if you just go for 3, you've only got the 1 rate increase. So it may seem somehow less burdensome than adding it on top of another rate increase.
A good point. The 3 years is what's the average cost?
I
Right?
think
23, it's,
It was
39.
39, 45.
39
so it's 16 more, or 16 more.
instead of
And some companies may prefer just to pay,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
just write a check and say, let's just be done with it and move on, essentially, too. So
I would anticipate that probably will be the case for a good portion.
And we'll offer that, right, if they just want to pay it up front.
Yeah, I think what we would propose is we would say we plan on allocating over the specified number of periods. If you'd like to pay up front, please contact our office and we'll be happy to work with you on payment accommodations.
and there's no interest that's going to be charged to them in terms of the
No.
spreading of it. So the point is that
No.
So it's whatever you think's fair. I just know that, we had the same experience with the state and we had to pay it back all in 1 year. We were surprised. We're trying to help people out, whether it's 3 years or 5 years. It's what you think's fair. I want to thank these 2 gentlemen because, the audit did indicate something's wrong. They checked and thought it had to do with something else. We thought it had to do with the decrease in revenue as a result of a renegotiation with the state university's bill or something, right?
Yeah, change.
But they kept looking at it and they found it. Now, they had to scramble. They weren't here when this happened. You understand? This happened before their watch. But they did a lot of work. I know, John, I think you were here all weekend trying to find out, get to the bottom of this quickly because we wanted to get it to you as soon as possible. We want to hide anything, be as transparent as possible, admit that a mistake was being made. And I think the money is owed, our fiduciary relationship is owed the utility. So it's just how long you want to give them the payback.
And I will say we're not we'll make mistakes, obviously. But I can assure you that John and I will put policies and practices in place that this particular problem won't happen again. So I think the last thing we want to do is come before you again with the same mistake. So we're working diligently on how to make sure that that we avoid this in the future.
Corey,
I
what
appreciate
about?
that it was caught.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are 16 that were underbilled that you're recommending because their service has already been terminated that we
Yeah.
not
Can't go after
collect
them.
that $22,000. So
Yeah, we certainly could bill them and send a letter requesting payment. We've sent the final bill. We've terminated service. They're not at that location. There are a couple that still, I think 5 total that have other accounts with the city, not at that location. But we felt that it was when we send the final bill, that's the final bill. So
sure.
difficult to collect
To
those.
go back
Not
and
that we
say a
couldn't make
final,
an
final.
effort. For sure.
Okay. Thanks.
all right. Any other questions?
So as for discussion purposes, I would be interested in a proposal that reduces the amount that we are seeking to collect. If I, as a business owner, send an invoice to a client and it's wrong, and I have to come back and ask for more money because I didn't properly put all my time on the invoice, as a way of sort of recognizing my error, I would offer to make some kind of reduction in the overall invoice. And I'm curious if the council has an interest in some ways to sort of, for us to sort of take ownership of some of this.
I thought about that initially, but the problem I have with that is that we are responsible to the citizens of Ames, and this isn't our money as independent business owners. This is money that goes into the city coffer for the benefit of other projects. So I wouldn't support that if that were a motion that were made for that reason.
Yeah, that's why we want to be as liberal as possible, the payback, make it soften the blow.
Okay. I'm interested in hearing a motion then.
I'd move alternative 1 with the slight change that it be paid over 3 years instead of 5.
Is there a second?
Avoid the rate increase.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? For some reason, I am not finding the council action form. So is it a resolution on this one?
Just a motion.
Motion, all right.
By the way, does that include the writing off the $22,000 too?
It's, yes,
included that.
that's,
That's
it's
part of it.
alternative 1 with the 1 modification.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
waive
Okay.
the underbill charges.
All right.
So help us think through the 3 years versus 5 years and how the rate increase plays out in that. From the customer's perspective, it gives them a little more leeway if we spread over 5 years. How are we helping them again by going to the 3 years?
You're asking me?
Or staff?
I think we were anticipating, so there's a rate increase coming up in July. If we were to extend it 5 years, I think we do rate increases every other year typically. And I think that's what our budget entailed when we completed that process last April. So I think by eliminating it to 3 years, it's just, we avoid that, I guess, second increase.
But it is true, we probably have a sewer rate
increase.
sewer rate every, you're going to get a rate increase every year.
Just-
So your total bill between the two, maybe you should look at it that way, maybe, huh?
An alternate.
I guess I'm still not grasping the benefit of going to 3 years. We're going to spread this out.
Well, okay, so 2 things. 1, we have the money back sooner to put into projects. When we know we're already losing money in other ways, it seems like it would be good to have the money back sooner. But also, psychologically, it just seems to me that it would, if it were me, I would be thinking, what, the city is increasing my rates again, and they've added this additional payment, and it just feels like it's another thing on top of what's already being done. And these larger businesses maybe would not see it that way, but that's my main thinking on it. So that's why I made the motion.
Any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey,
Nay.
Okay, motion carried 3-2.
so maybe just one thing to underscore, and the mayor made this point. In an organization of this size, there are going to be mistakes. Just inevitable with all of the best practices we put in place. So I think we try to learn from these mistakes and move on. But I want the public who's watching this to recognize there is no organization of the size of the city of Ames that doesn't occasionally have some kind of accounting error in it. It's just the nature of an organization this size. So there's a lot of grace in this. We learn and move on.
Well, and again, this precedes Corey and John's watch too. So, I mean, we're not looking for anybody to point fingers at. It's just more or less, we appreciate the fact that you were diligent, you found it, got it dealt with, and we all learned from it essentially too.
But there'll be something on your watch. It's
Absolutely.
just, so that's just
grace.
No.
Save that grace for that.
Yeah.
Don't use it all up.
That's right.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Next item, number 4. Mark, does the council have justification to go into closed session this evening?
Yes, the council does, and I will point out it's not for the Iowa Code section that was in the on the agenda. That was a mistake, but instead it's Iowa Code section 21.51C, which allows the council to go into closed session to consider matters in litigation or threatened litigation. The rest of the sentence on the agenda item is correct. It's just the code section was
Okay.
wrong. So, but yes, the council has the legal authority to go into closed session.
Is there a motion to go in closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right.
Okay. Hey, John, wait a second for you.
All right, we are back in open session, and we have one disposition of Communications Council, an email from Sean Kelly regarding sidewalk safety program. Is there an interest in getting a memo from staff on this email?
would move we get a memo about how this topic relates to the bike ped master plan, if this topic relates to the bike ped master plan.
Doesn't.
No,
This is maintenance. I think this was talking about maintenance.
but I mean, there are other topics in there too. So like Ross not having a sidewalk, for example, is in this letter.
Oh, fill
So-
in, infill.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking for a memo about how it relates to.
Yeah, I don't think it may not directly tie to the bike ped master plan, but it does tie with what other communities do. So we could bring you back a memo with comps.
Okay.
For instance, West Des Moines, a missing segment of sidewalk, a gap, is considered a defect.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So they have like a defect A through E, that's like a defect D.
Okay.
So we could bring you the comps and what other community standards are.
All right. I'd move for a memo from staff on this.
Second. All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, council comments. Brevin. Anything
Bike
tonight?
ride Saturday.
What's that?
Bike ride on Saturday.
What time?
9
Where at?
here at City Hall. And then we're going to go out west and we're going to check out the new future parkland
Yeah.
and swing by Lab and Tahira Park. I forget where else.
Very good. Thank you.
Nothing tonight.
Nothing tonight.
Nothing.
I want to congratulate Rachel.
That's right. Yeah,
On
congratulations,
graduating
Rachel. What'd you do?
To celebrate or to
No. What'd you do to get the? No, I don't know that. What'd you do to get congratulations so people don't know what you did?
I got my bachelor's in chemical engineering and my MBA from Iowa State.
All in one fell swoop.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Amazing.
That's all.
On to the doctorate, right?
Not yet.
All right. I had nothing else tonight, so entertain motion to adjourn.
Move to
adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank